How do you know me? You were never supposed to see me here. That's my license.
Then they've been watching you for months.
Gary Young was 41, a structural engineer in Pittsburgh who looked exactly like the kind of man life overlooked. Most people believed Hannah had already outgrown the quiet husband who drove the same 6-year-old Ford Explorer, carried homemade coffee in a stainless steel tumbler, and never cared about expensive watches or tailored suits. What they didn't know was that Gary had spent the past 3 years quietly assisting federal investigators on multi-million-dollar infrastructure fraud cases. When a violent storm canceled his bridge inspection and sent him home early, he looked through his living room window, saw Hannah smiling warmly at another man, and the stranger's face went pale the instant he recognized Gary. If you're watching from somewhere in the world today, I'd love to know where you're joining from. Drop your country and your local time in the comments below. And if you enjoy slow-burning stories filled with suspense, smart twists, and satisfying justice, take a moment to subscribe so you won't miss tomorrow's story. Gary Young did not rush to the front door. He stood beneath the covered porch while rain hammered against the gutters in steady sheets. Water rolled off the brim of his navy work cap and gathered around his boots. Through the wide living room window, he watched one last silent exchange inside. Hannah smiled. Not the polite smile she wore at charity dinners or neighborhood barbecues. It was relaxed, comfortable, the kind of smile Gary remembered from years earlier, before promotions, business trips, and conversations that had gradually become shorter than the evenings themselves. The man sitting across from her leaned slightly forward. Then he looked toward the window. Everything changed. The color drained from his face. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes widened with unmistakable recognition. Gary saw something he had learned to trust during years of forensic investigations. Fear rarely arrived before guilt. It usually arrived before exposure. He opened the front door. The familiar scent of cinnamon candles mixed with fresh coffee drifted through the hallway. Hannah looked up first. Her smile disappeared so quickly it almost seemed imaginary. Gary, you came home early. Her voice carried surprise, not joy. The inspection was canceled, Gary answered calmly as he removed his wet jacket. Storm warning. His tone never changed. He hung the jacket neatly beside the closet before turning toward the living room. Only then did he look directly at the visitor. The man stood almost immediately. He was somewhere in his late 40s, dressed in an expensive charcoal sports coat that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. His polished leather shoes reflected the recessed lighting above the hardwood floor. Yet despite every sign of confidence, his hands remained unusually still. Too still. People trying to control themselves often forgot their hands. Hannah cleared her throat. Gary, this is Ethan Brooks. She forced another smile. He's helping me look at investment opportunities. Ethan extended a hand. Nice to finally meet you, Mr. Young. Gary accepted the handshake, firm, brief. Ethan's palm felt colder than the weather outside. You already know my last name, Gary said. There was no accusation in his voice, only observation. A pause followed. Barely 2 seconds. Long enough. Hannah answered before Ethan could. I mentioned you. Gary looked at her. When? She blinked. What? When did you mention me? Oh, I don't know. Probably last week. Ethan finally found his voice. Hannah talks about you often. Gary nodded once. I see. No smile, no challenge, no anger, only another quiet observation stored somewhere behind his calm expression. The room settled into uncomfortable silence. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. The grandfather clock near the fireplace marked another minute. Hannah hurried toward the kitchen. Can I make everyone fresh coffee? I'm actually leaving, Ethan interrupted. So soon? Hannah asked. I just remembered another appointment downtown. Gary glanced toward the coffee table. 2 ceramic mugs, both still warm. A folder lay between them. The moment Ethan noticed Gary's eyes drifting toward it, he casually folded the cover closed. Too casually. Gary noticed that too. "What line of work are you in?" Gary asked. "Real estate consulting?" "Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania." Gary nodded again. "Busy market?" "It has been." Another pause. Gary watched Ethan carefully. The man avoided direct eye contact every few seconds, looking instead toward the hallway, the window, then the front door. Someone calculating exits, someone eager to leave. Most people believed investigations were solved by dramatic confessions. Gary knew better. They were solved by ordinary behavior. The smallest inconsistencies usually mattered most. Ethan picked up his briefcase. "It was nice meeting you." Gary stepped aside. "So we've never met before?" The question sounded almost casual. "Almost." Ethan hesitated. "I don't believe so." Gary studied him another second. "Interesting. You looked like you recognized me before I walked inside." A tiny muscle tightened beneath Ethan's jaw. "I probably saw your picture somewhere." "Maybe." Gary held the door open. "Drive safely." Ethan thanked him quietly before disappearing into the rain. Gary remained on the porch long enough to watch the black BMW X5 back carefully out of the driveway. Pennsylvania plate, LTX 4000, 821. He read it once. Then again. Years of inspection work had trained his memory. License numbers, bridge identification codes, permit references. He rarely forgot combinations of letters and numbers. The SUV disappeared around the corner. Only then did Gary close the door. Hannah was already collecting coffee cups. "You've been quiet." "I've only been home 3 minutes." She laughed softly. Too quickly. "Ethan works with several investment firms." Gary removed his watch and placed it beside the kitchen counter. "What kind of investments?" "Commercial properties." "Do we need commercial properties?" "No." "So why is he here?" She shrugged. "Just exploring options." Gary poured himself a glass of water. "The options required 2 cups of coffee." Her shoulders stiffened. "I wasn't expecting to defend having a guest." "I'm not asking you to." Silence returned. Gary drank half the glass. "I asked a question." Hannah folded her arms. "You're acting strange." Gary almost smiled. That sentence interested him. People often described calmness as strange whenever they expected anger. "I came home early," he said. "I found someone I don't know sitting in my living room." He appeared uncomfortable the moment he saw me. I asked what he does. "I'm still waiting for an answer beyond investments." Hannah looked away. "He advises property acquisitions." "For whom?" "I don't remember." Gary watched her carefully. She had always answered quickly. Today every answer arrived 1 or 2 seconds late. Small delays, small inventions, nothing dramatic, just enough. She changed the subject. "How long before they'll reschedule the bridge inspection?" "Probably Monday." "That's good." Gary nodded. "Maybe." He carried his glass toward the sink. His reflection briefly appeared in the kitchen window. 41. Gray beginning to appear around his temples. The same man most people assumed had settled into an ordinary career. The same man Ethan Brooks had recognized instantly. That recognition bothered Gary far more than Hannah's explanations. He had testified in federal hearings. He had examined collapsed parking structures. He had reviewed engineering failures worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But nearly every investigation had remained confidential. Very few names became public. Very few faces did. So where had Ethan seen him? Dinner passed quietly. Hannah spoke about work. Gary listened, mostly. His thoughts kept returning to Ethan's expression. Recognition, fear, calculation. Not surprise, recognition. After Hannah went upstairs to answer what she called an urgent work email, Gary remained alone in the dining room. He opened the drawer beneath the sideboard. Inside sat an old leather notebook, dark brown, edges worn smooth from years of field use. He had carried it during dozens of forensic inspections before eventually switching to encrypted digital files. Most pages contained bridge numbers, concrete samples, case references, occasionally names. He turned pages slowly beneath the warm dining room light. Project after project, county after county, until one heading stopped his hand. 3 years earlier. A preliminary federal review involving questionable engineering certifications connected to several commercial developments outside Pittsburgh. The case had never reached trial under his supervision. Another agency had taken control before completion. Gary read the first page, then the second. Near the bottom of a witness contact list, a familiar surname quietly waited. Brooks. He stared at it without blinking. The first name wasn't visible anymore, only the last name. The rest of the page had been folded beneath another document years before. Gary slowly unfolded the brittle paper. Gary unfolded the brittle page with the same care he used when examining fractured concrete samples. Old paper tore easily. So did old assumptions. The folded corner had hidden a single line from view for years. As the crease flattened beneath his fingertips, the full name appeared. Ethan Brooks, Asset Acquisition Coordinator, Summit Crest Development Group. Gary did not blink. He simply leaned back in his chair and stared at the page while rain continued tapping against the dining room windows. Memory worked in strange ways. Sometimes it buried important details for years. Sometimes one name unlocked an entire chain of forgotten moments. Summit Crest. He remembered the company now. 3 years earlier, several commercial buildings outside Pittsburgh had raised questions during a federal infrastructure review. On paper, everything appeared legitimate. Soil reports matched engineering calculations. Foundation inspections carried proper certifications. Occupancy permits had been issued without delay. Yet something had never felt right. Gary had been brought in as an independent structural consultant after inspectors discovered unusual settlement patterns beneath a warehouse complex near Monroeville. The concrete itself wasn't the problem. The paperwork was. Different reports carried identical wording. Separate engineers supposedly working months apart had made the exact same spelling mistakes. Signatures appeared authentic. The conclusions did not. Gary remembered spending nearly 6 weeks comparing reports line by line before forwarding his findings to a federal investigative task force. Then the case disappeared. Another agency assumed jurisdiction. His consulting contract ended. He moved on to other assignments. Or so he thought. Now Ethan Brooks had walked into his own living room. Not by coincidence. Gary closed the notebook and looked toward the staircase. The upstairs hallway remained quiet. Hannah's office door was still closed. She had said she was answering work emails. He checked the kitchen clock. 8:47 p.m. Instead of climbing the stairs, Gary carried the notebook into his small home office. The room reflected the man who used it. Shelves filled with engineering manuals, county bridge maps rolled into labeled tubes, 2 filing cabinets, 1 drafting table. Nothing expensive, nothing decorative, everything organized. He opened the lower cabinet and pulled out a gray archive box marked Federal Consulting, 2023. Inside sat dozens of neatly labeled folders. He found the Summit Crest file within minutes. The folder was thinner than he remembered. Several original documents had been transferred when the investigation changed agencies. Only his working copies remained. He spread everything across the drafting table: engineering certifications, inspection photographs, property ownership summaries, corporate organizational charts. The deeper he looked, the more familiar the names became. Summit Crest Development Group, Blue Horizon Property Holdings, Allegheny Urban Renewal Partners. At the time, they had appeared to be unrelated companies. Tonight, something caught Gary's attention: the mailing addresses. He compared 3 documents. Every company used different offices, different phone numbers, different executives, yet all official correspondence eventually routed through the same downtown Pittsburgh building, 1 Liberty Center, floor 21. Interesting. He opened his laptop. Public corporate records remained accessible through Pennsylvania's business registry. Within minutes, he confirmed the addresses. Most companies no longer existed. Some had dissolved. Others had quietly merged into newer entities. Nothing unusual about that. Companies changed names every year, but another detail stood out. One successor company remained active: Stonegate Infrastructure Holdings. Gary wrote the name inside his notebook, not because it proved anything, because details mattered. Always. His phone vibrated. A message from Hannah. "Still working." He glanced toward the ceiling before replying. "Looking through old project files." Her answer arrived quickly. "You work too much." Gary looked at the screen for another second, then locked the phone without responding. He continued reading. At exactly 9:18 p.m., another memory surfaced. Not from paperwork, from a conference room. He remembered Ethan standing near the back wall during one preliminary meeting, not speaking, simply observing. Gary had barely noticed him then. One of many corporate representatives. Quiet, professional, forgettable. Except tonight, Ethan had recognized him instantly. That meant Ethan remembered the investigation far more clearly than Gary had. Why, Gary leaned back in his chair. People remembered investigators only when investigators threatened something valuable. The realization settled quietly. This wasn't about an old engineering inspection anymore. Someone had carried those memories forward for 3 years. Someone had reason to worry. His eyes drifted toward another folder. Witness interview notes. Most interviews had involved contractors, site managers, surveyors. Near the end sat one short interview summary, conducted by another investigator. Subject declined detailed questioning. Name Ethan Brooks. Gary read the notes twice. The interview lasted only 14 minutes. Ethan claimed he coordinated property purchases but had no knowledge of engineering reports. Nothing unusual, nothing incriminating. Still, Gary noticed one handwritten sentence in the margin. Subject appears more concerned than cooperative. No follow-up explanation. No additional notes. Gary smiled faintly. The investigator had seen it too. Concern. Not anger, not confidence. Concern. Exactly the same expression Ethan had worn in Gary's living room. Coincidence became less convincing. Gary carefully returned every document to its folder except the interview notes. Those stayed on his desk. At 10:05 p.m., he shut off the office light. The hallway remained dark except for the soft glow beneath Hannah's office door. As he walked upstairs, he heard her laughing quietly through wireless earbuds. Business call, maybe. Personal conversation, possibly. Gary kept walking. He entered the bedroom without interruption. 15 minutes later, Hannah came inside, carrying her laptop. "You've been buried in paperwork all evening." "So have you." She smiled. "Quarterly reports." Gary nodded. "What kind?" "Marketing." "You work in financial operations." She paused. "Some marketing budgets." Another small correction. Another tiny inconsistency. Gary noticed. He always noticed. Neither mentioned Ethan again. Morning arrived gray and cool. Gary woke before sunrise, as usual. Coffee brewed while local news discussed flooding across western Pennsylvania. Hannah left early. "I've got an off-site meeting." "What time?" 9. "Where?" "Downtown." "Which office?" She hesitated. "The client changed locations." Gary simply nodded. "Drive safely." She kissed his cheek before leaving. He watched through the kitchen window as her silver Lexus pulled away. Only after she disappeared did he open his laptop again. He searched publicly available business registrations. No company matching the name Hannah had casually mentioned the previous evening conducted business in the building she claimed to be visiting. Interesting, not proof. Just another note. At 8:30, Gary drove toward downtown Pittsburgh himself. Not to follow Hannah. He disliked assumptions. Instead, he parked 2 blocks from One Liberty Center, the same building appearing repeatedly inside the Summit Crest files. Commuters hurried through damp sidewalks carrying umbrellas and coffee. Office towers reflected low clouds hanging over the city. Gary entered the lobby. Marble floors, bronze directory. 21 floors listed dozens of businesses. His eyes stopped. Stonegate Infrastructure Holdings, Suite 2104, still active. He said nothing. He simply memorized the directory and left. Across the street, he bought coffee from a small cafe. The cashier handed him his receipt. He sat beside the window overlooking the building entrance. Not watching for Hannah. Watching patterns. At 9:27 a.m., a familiar black BMW X5 pulled smoothly into the underground garage entrance. License plate, LTX 4821. Ethan Brooks stepped out wearing another tailored charcoal suit. He checked his watch before disappearing inside One Liberty Center. Gary never moved. He took one slow sip of coffee, then opened the notebook resting beside him. Beneath the words, Stonegate Infrastructure Holdings, he added 4 more. Ethan works there. He underlined the sentence once. No conclusions, only facts. Because facts survived courtrooms, emotions rarely did. As Gary closed the notebook, his phone buzzed. An automated notification from his home security system flashed across the screen. Motion detected. Front driveway. He frowned. Hannah had already left. No deliveries were scheduled. He opened the live camera feed. A dark SUV had just pulled slowly past his house. It did not stop. It circled the block. Then appeared again. Gary did not start the engine. He remained parked across from One Liberty Center while the security notification replayed automatically on his phone. 10:02:14 a.m. A black Chevrolet Tahoe entered the camera's field of view. It slowed as it passed his mailbox. 10:02:31. The SUV continued to the end of the street. 10:03:07. It returned. This time even slower. The driver never stopped, never stepped out, never approached the house. Yet the vehicle remained visible long enough to trigger motion detection twice. Gary replayed the footage again. Then a third time. The front windshield reflected enough morning sunlight to hide the driver's face. The rear windows were deeply tinted. No license plate was visible. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Simply unusual. He locked the phone and looked back toward One Liberty Center. People streamed in and out of the revolving doors. Lawyers, consultants, construction executives, investment managers. Hundreds of ordinary professionals beginning another workday. If someone were watching him, he couldn't tell. He preferred it that way. Good investigators assumed they had already been noticed. He finished his coffee, threw away the cup, and drove toward his office without making another stop. His consulting office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick warehouse along the Allegheny River. Only 5 employees worked there. Most specialized in structural assessments after storms, fires, or construction failures. The receptionist smiled as Gary entered. "Morning. Morning, Claire. You've got a certified envelope." She pointed toward his desk. No return address. Gary thanked her and carried the envelope inside his office. The package contained 1 sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature. Only 1 sentence. Some foundations collapse years after the first crack. Gary read it twice, then turned the paper over. Blank. He examined the envelope. Standard overnight delivery, paid in cash, mailed from downtown Pittsburgh before sunrise. Again, no fingerprints visible to the naked eye. He slipped everything into a clear evidence sleeve from one of his inspection kits, not because he believed it was immediately important, because preserving original condition had become second nature. At 10:30, his senior project engineer Michael Turner knocked on the open door. "You've got time to review the Mercer County Bridge report." Gary looked up. "Give me 10 minutes. Michael nodded. County commissioners moved the meeting to tomorrow. After Michael left, Gary stared once more at the anonymous message. Threat warning coincidence. Words alone proved nothing. Timing mattered more. The envelope arrived less than 24 hours after Ethan Brooks appeared inside his home. That timing deserved attention, nothing else. The morning passed, reviewing steel fatigue calculations and foundation photographs. For nearly 3 hours, Gary concentrated entirely on engineering. Numbers steadied his thinking. Concrete either met specification or it didn't. Steel either exceeded tolerance or it failed. People rarely behaved so predictably. Just after 1 o'clock, his cell phone vibrated. Detective Laura Bennett. Gary smiled faintly before answering. "Laura, I was wondering if you'd finally answer." "I usually do." "You owe me lunch." "I probably do." Laura Bennett had spent 18 years with the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office before transferring to a statewide public corruption unit. She and Gary had crossed paths during several infrastructure investigations. Neither considered the other a close friend. Professional trust came first. That mattered more. "You sound busy," she said. "I've had quieter mornings." "You always say that before something interesting." Gary glanced toward the evidence sleeve on his desk. I've got a question." "I'm listening." 3 years ago. Summit Crest Development." Silence, only for a moment. "I remember." "What happened after the case left our task force?" Laura didn't answer immediately. "I can't discuss active investigations." "So it stayed active." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Another pause. Finally, she sighed. "Why are you asking now?" "A man connected to the file appeared in my living room yesterday." Silence returned, longer this time. "What was his name?" "Ethan Brooks." Laura exhaled quietly. "Don't contact him." "I wasn't planning to." "If he contacted you first, document everything." "I always do." "You still keep those notebooks?" "Every one of them." "Good." Gary leaned back in his chair. "Should I be concerned?" "I'm saying nothing officially." "I understand. But if I were you..." She stopped. "If you were me, I'd keep copies of everything." "Already done." "And Gary?" "Yes. If anything unusual happens..." "The kind of unusual you're already thinking about. Call me before you call anyone else." The line disconnected. Gary lowered the phone slowly. Laura had never dramatized anything, ever, which made her caution more meaningful. He opened the notebook and added another entry. "Laura remembers Ethan. Advised documentation. No assumptions. Only facts." At 3:15, he left the office for an on-site inspection near Cranberry Township. The work itself proved routine. A parking structure showing harmless expansion joint movement, no significant structural concerns. The inspection finished before 5. On the drive home, he chose a different route than usual. Not because he suspected anyone followed him, because engineers constantly varied routes around construction delays. Old habit. Halfway across the Veterans Bridge, he glanced into the rearview mirror. Black Chevrolet Tahoe. 3 cars behind. He kept driving. Downtown traffic compressed near a traffic light. The Tahoe remained behind him. Still nothing unusual. Thousands of black SUVs traveled Pittsburgh every day. At the next intersection, Gary turned unexpectedly toward the Strip District. The Tahoe continued straight. Coincidence. He crossed it off mentally. By 6 o'clock, he pulled into his driveway. Everything appeared normal. Mail, garden, porch, no unfamiliar vehicles. Inside the house felt unusually quiet. Hannah? No answer. Her car wasn't in the garage. A note rested beside the coffee maker. Dinner with Melissa. Home around 8. Melissa Carter, one of Hannah's longtime co-workers. Gary recognized the name immediately. He placed the note back exactly where he found it, then checked the refrigerator. 2 meal prep containers remained untouched. One belonged to Hannah. She rarely missed planned dinners at home unless work interfered. Again, interesting. Not evidence, just another observation. He microwaved leftover chili and carried the bowl into his office. Instead of opening engineering files, he searched public property databases. Stonegate Infrastructure Holdings owned surprisingly little property directly. Instead, dozens of limited liability companies appeared beneath it. Different names, different registered agents, same mailing address, 21 floors above downtown Pittsburgh. A pattern emerged. Not illegal, merely complicated. He printed a corporate relationship chart and pinned it to the corkboard beside his desk. 7 companies connected, then 11, then 16. The web spread wider than expected. At 7:42 p.m., his home security application chimed softly. Front camera. Someone stood on the porch. Gary opened the live feed. A delivery driver placed a small, padded envelope beside the door. Nothing unusual. Seconds later, the driver left. Gary waited until the truck disappeared before retrieving the package. Inside sat a single USB flash drive. No note, no shipping receipt, no fingerprints visible. He carried it directly into his office. He did not plug it into his personal computer. Instead, he opened a locked cabinet and removed an isolated forensic laptop. No network connection, no personal files, used exclusively for examining unknown digital media. The flash drive contained only one video file. No title, length, 48 seconds. Gary pressed play. The footage came from a surveillance camera. Date stamp, 2 days earlier. Location, 1 Liberty Center parking garage. The video showed Ethan Brooks speaking with another man beside a black BMW. No audio. After several seconds, the second man handed Ethan a manila folder. Ethan opened it. Even through the grainy footage, Gary recognized the first page. It was a photograph, his own driver's license photo. Gary watched without expression. Ethan looked at the picture, then nodded once. The second man pointed toward something off camera. Both men entered separate vehicles. Video ended. Gary replayed it. Then froze the final clear frame of the second man. Late 50s, silver hair, dark overcoat, strong profile. Unfamiliar. He enlarged the image. Not perfect, but recognizable enough. Someone had been passing around his photograph before Ethan ever entered his house. Gary leaned back slowly. The anonymous warning. The surveillance footage. The repeated appearance of Ethan Brooks. None proved Hannah's involvement. None proved criminal activity. But together they formed something far more valuable. A pattern. And Gary had spent his entire career following patterns until they revealed the truth. Just then, headlights swept across the office window. Hannah had arrived home. Gary closed the forensic laptop before Hannah opened the front door. The USB drive returned to its evidence sleeve. The sleeve disappeared inside the locked drawer beneath his drafting table. By the time footsteps crossed the hardwood floor, the only thing visible on his desk was a bridge inspection report. Hannah walked into the office carrying her purse and a paper shopping bag. "You've been working again?" Gary looked up. "Most of the evening." She smiled tiredly. "Melissa kept me out longer than I expected." "How is she?" "Busy." She hung her coat beside the door. "Her department might get reorganized." Gary nodded once. No follow-up questions. Instead, he watched details. She set her phone face down on the kitchen island, something she almost never did. Normally, the device remained within reach. Tonight, she seemed unusually careful. She opened the refrigerator. "You already ate." "I did. I'll make something quick." Gary returned his attention to the report, not because he was reading it, because silence often encouraged people to fill it. Sure enough, Hannah spoke again. "You didn't ask where we went." "I assumed somewhere downtown. We tried a new Italian place." "Did you enjoy it?" "It was nice." Another pause. Gary heard cabinets opening, plates, silverware, microwave, ordinary sounds. Yet one detail bothered him. Melissa Carter frequently posted restaurant photos on social media, not because she sought attention. She simply enjoyed documenting dinners with friends. After Hannah went upstairs to shower, Gary opened his phone. Melissa had uploaded nothing that evening, not unusual, but her last visible location update showed she had attended a charity networking event in Cranberry Township, nearly 30 miles from downtown Pittsburgh. Interesting. Again, not evidence, only another inconsistency. At 9:15, Hannah returned wearing comfortable clothes. She settled onto the sofa. "What are you doing tomorrow?" "Site inspection in Beaver County." She nodded. "I'll probably be home late." "Another client meeting." "Quarter-end planning." Gary looked at her for a second, then smiled politely. "Drive safely." She smiled back. The conversation ended. Nothing dramatic, nothing confrontational. By 10:30, the house grew quiet. Hannah fell asleep quickly. Gary remained awake, not thinking about betrayal, thinking about timing. Someone had collected his photograph. Someone had anonymously warned him. Someone had delivered surveillance footage. These events were too coordinated to ignore. At exactly 11:07 p.m., he quietly left the bedroom. His home office overlooked the backyard. He switched off every interior light before sitting beside the window. Years of field investigations had taught him one useful habit. Dark rooms revealed bright things. Bright rooms revealed nothing. Midnight approached. The neighborhood remained still. Then headlights appeared. A vehicle rolled slowly past the rear alley behind his property. Not the front street, the alley. The SUV never stopped. It continued toward the next intersection before disappearing. Gary noted the time. 12:03 a.m. No assumptions, no conclusions. He simply wrote the observation into his notebook. At 6 the following morning, Gary left home before sunrise. Instead of driving directly toward Beaver County, he made one stop. The Allegheny County Recorder of Deeds office. Public property records opened promptly at 8. He waited inside with surveyor's title researchers and several attorneys. When his turn arrived, he requested archived ownership records connected to 3 limited liability companies listed under Stonegate Infrastructure Holdings. The clerk spent several minutes searching. Finally, she printed a transaction summary. Gary thanked her and stepped aside. His eyes moved carefully across the pages. Property transfers, mortgage releases, corporate acquisitions, nothing immediately unusual. Until one signature caught his attention. Authorized Representative Rebecca Holloway. The name meant nothing. He continued reading. Another transaction. Same signature. Different company. Another, again. Rebecca Holloway appeared repeatedly across nearly every corporate transfer. One woman, 16 companies? Interesting. He searched the state bar directory on his phone. Rebecca Holloway, corporate attorney, Holloway and Pierce Legal Group, downtown Pittsburgh, Suite 2107. Gary looked up slowly. Suite 2107. Stonegate Infrastructure occupied Suite 2104. Same floor, 3 doors apart. Coincidence became increasingly expensive. He folded the papers neatly before leaving. His inspection in Beaver County consumed most of the afternoon. Bridge expansion joints, concrete core samples, routine engineering work. He enjoyed it. Real structures never lied. At 3:40, his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered. Gary Young. No response. Only breathing. Steady. Controlled. After 8 seconds, the caller disconnected. Gary saved the number. No voicemail followed. 5 minutes later, another text arrived. Unknown sender. Stop asking about Stonegate. No signature. Gary did not reply. Instead, he captured screenshots and exported the message into his documentation archive. Then he called Detective Laura Bennett. She answered immediately. You got something. I received a warning. Text. And a silent phone call. Forward everything. I already encrypted copies. Good. Laura sounded calmer than before. Listen carefully. I'm listening. Has anyone approached your office? Not yet. Home. Only anonymous deliveries. She hesitated. Gary. Yes. There's a reason I told you not to contact Ethan Brooks. I haven't. He may not be acting independently. Gary looked toward the Ohio River below the bridge he had just inspected. What does that mean? I can't explain. You can. I legally can't. Another pause. But I'll tell you this. Gary waited. The investigation didn't disappear. It expanded. Into what? I've already said too much. The call ended. Gary stared at the silent phone, expanded. That single word carried enormous weight. Large investigations rarely expanded unless investigators discovered something significantly larger than the original allegations. Construction fraud, money laundering, public corruption, corporate bribery. Any of them fit. None were proven. The drive home passed quietly. Near sunset, Gary stopped at a neighborhood grocery store. Nothing unusual. Milk, coffee, bread. As he returned to the parking lot, someone spoke behind him. Mr. Young. Gary turned calmly. An elderly man stood beside a silver sedan. Late 70s, plaid shirt, veteran's cap, friendly expression. You probably don't remember me. I'm sorry. We met about 4 years ago. Gary searched his memory. The man smiled. You inspected the church roof after that windstorm. Recognition surfaced. St. Andrew S. That's right. You saved us nearly $300,000. Gary shook his hand. I only found the real problem. The man laughed. Most engineers would have signed the insurance estimate without climbing into the attic. Gary smiled faintly. How's the building? Solid. The elderly man looked at him more carefully. You look distracted. Busy week. He nodded. Can I give you one piece of advice? Gary waited. When something feels wrong? The old man tapped his own chest. Don't ignore that feeling just because you can't explain it yet. Gary thanked him. The conversation lasted barely 2 minutes, yet the words lingered during the drive home. Evidence mattered. Facts mattered. Still, instinct built from decades of observation also deserved respect. That evening, Hannah arrived unusually cheerful. I've got great news. Gary looked up from the dining table. What happened? My company invited me to represent our department at a leadership retreat. When? Next weekend. Where? Nemacolin Resort. She smiled. 3 days. Gary nodded. Congratulations. It could help my promotion. I'm sure it could. She stepped closer. I almost said no. Why? I didn't want to leave you alone. Gary smiled politely. I'll survive. She laughed. I knew you'd say that. After dinner, Hannah carried her laptop upstairs. Gary remained at the table sorting mail. One envelope bore the logo of Hannah's employer, routine corporate correspondence. He almost ignored it. Then he noticed something odd. The envelope had been resealed. Factory adhesive never looked uneven. This one did. Someone had opened it previously. Perhaps Hannah herself. Perhaps someone else. He held it beneath the kitchen light. The edge had clearly been lifted and pressed shut again. Gary returned it exactly where he found it. He never opened mail addressed to someone else. Not because curiosity failed him, because illegally obtained information often destroyed otherwise solid cases. Legal evidence, proper procedures, those principles had guided his entire career. At 9:48 p.m., while Hannah remained upstairs, Gary's encrypted email application displayed a new incoming message. No sender name, only an automatically generated address. The subject line contained 4 words, "She isn't the target." Gary opened it carefully. Inside sat one sentence, "You're investigating the wrong person." Attached beneath the message was a high-resolution photograph taken less than 12 hours earlier. The image showed Gary leaving the Allegheny County Recorder's office that morning. Someone had photographed him from across the street. Gary studied the photograph for nearly a minute. It had been taken with professional equipment, long lens, sharp focus, perfect exposure despite the distance. Whoever photographed him knew exactly where to stand. The angle revealed the entrance to the Allegheny County Recorder's office. It also suggested something else. Someone had anticipated his visit before he arrived. Gary downloaded the original image without opening it on any personal device. The forensic laptop extracted the metadata. No GPS coordinates, no camera serial number. The file had been scrubbed, professionally. He checked one final detail. The timestamp, 11:18:42 a.m. He opened his notebook. At exactly 11:18 that morning, he had been walking toward his truck after leaving the records office. The timeline matched perfectly. Nothing more, nothing less. He closed the laptop and sent Detective Laura Bennett both the photograph and the anonymous email through their encrypted channel. Less than 4 minutes later, his phone rang. "You weren't kidding," Laura said. "I rarely do." That image was cleaned. I noticed. The average person wouldn't. Gary leaned back in his chair. "What does that tell you?" "It tells me whoever sent this has resources." "Law enforcement?" "No." "Private?" "More likely." Laura paused. "Gary." "Yes." "Has Hannah seen any of this?" "No." "Keep it that way." "You think she's involved?" "I didn't say that." "You also didn't deny it." Another pause. "I'm telling you not to contaminate whatever this turns out to be." Gary understood exactly what she meant. If Hannah truly knew, nothing accusing her now would only destroy trust. If she knew everything confronting her would only warn everyone else. Either outcome benefited someone besides Gary. "I understand." "Good." "And Gary?" "Go ahead." "If they wanted to hurt you." "They've already had opportunities?" "Exactly." The line went silent. Gary remained seated long after the call ended. Laura had just confirmed something important without intending to. The anonymous messages, the surveillance footage, the warnings, the photograph. None had attempted to frighten him physically. Instead, someone seemed determined to guide his attention. Toward Stonegate, toward Ethan Brooks, toward something much larger. The next morning, Hannah left the house before 7. She kissed Gary lightly on the cheek. "I'll probably be late again." "No problem," she smiled. "You're unusually understanding this week." "I've had plenty to keep me busy." "I noticed." She laughed softly before leaving. Gary watched through the front window as her silver Lexus disappeared down the street. Only after she turned the corner did he move. He entered the garage. Mounted high above his workbench sat an old metal storage cabinet. Inside rested several hard plastic equipment cases, inspection drones, laser scanners, thermal imaging cameras, and beneath them a compact GPS field tracker originally purchased for construction equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The device required no permanent installation. A magnetic housing allowed temporary attachment beneath heavy machinery. Gary held it for several seconds, then placed it back inside the cabinet. No. Tracking Hannah's vehicle without her knowledge crossed a legal line he refused to cross. Evidence obtained improperly rarely survived court. He shut the cabinet. Instead, he chose a different approach. Public information, legal observation, documented facts. At 9:30, he scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Holloway's law office, not under a false name, under his own. Reason for meeting, commercial easement consultation. Perfectly plausible for a structural engineering consultant. The receptionist offered an opening the following afternoon. Gary accepted. No deception beyond the ordinary purpose of an introductory consultation. Enough to see the office. Observe. Nothing more. The remainder of the morning passed quietly. Around noon, Michael Turner entered Gary's office carrying blueprints. County approved the bridge reinforcement. Good. They moved the inspection deadline up. Gary reviewed several pages before signing. As Michael prepared to leave, he hesitated. Everything okay? Gary looked up. What makes you ask? You've been distracted. I've had unusual clients. Michael smiled. That's one way to put it. Before leaving, he added one more comment. Someone asked about you yesterday. Gary remained still. Who? Didn't catch his name. What did he want? He said he was looking for the owner. What did you tell him? That you were off-site. Gary nodded. What did he look like? Michael thought for a moment. Gray hair. Expensive coat? Maybe 60. Gary's attention sharpened. Anything else? He thanked me. And he looked around the office like he was memorizing everything. When? About 4 yesterday. Gary wrote down the time. Exactly 40 minutes before he received the anonymous phone call. Interesting. Again. Only another fact. No conclusions. At 1:15, he drove to downtown Pittsburgh. Instead of heading directly home afterward, he parked across from Holloway and Pierce Legal Group. 21st floor. Modern glass tower. Elegant lobby. Business continued normally. Executives entered. Clients exited. Couriers arrived every few minutes. Nothing unusual. Then, at exactly 2:07 p.m., Ethan Brooks emerged from the building. Gary didn't move. Ethan wore the same tailored navy suit from 2 days earlier. He carried no briefcase, only a sealed document envelope. A black sedan stopped beside the curb. The rear passenger door opened. Ethan climbed inside. The vehicle pulled away. Gary noted the license plate. Nothing else. No pursuit, no photographs. Observation ended. As he prepared to leave, another figure exited the building. Rebecca Holloway. Mid-50s, confident, professional. Silver blonde hair tied neatly behind her head. She walked alone toward a nearby cafe. Gary watched from inside his truck. She greeted the barista by name, ordered coffee, spent 10 minutes reading documents, then returned to her office. Routine. Predictable. No visible connection to Ethan beyond occupying the same building. Still, patterns mattered. The next afternoon, Gary arrived for his scheduled consultation. The receptionist welcomed him politely. Mr. Young. That's right. Miss Holloway will be with you shortly. The waiting area overlooked downtown Pittsburgh. Framed photographs displayed major commercial developments the firm had represented. Hotels, office towers, industrial parks. Gary examined each one casually. One project caught his attention. Stonegate Commerce Plaza, completed 4 years earlier. Rebecca Holloway herself appeared in the ribbon-cutting photograph, standing beside city officials, and beside another man, silver hair, dark overcoat. Gary felt his pulse slow. The same man from the surveillance video. He memorized the face. Moments later, Rebecca Holloway appeared. Mr. Young. She extended her hand confidently. Please come in. Her office reflected decades of success. Mahogany shelves, leather chairs, city skyline. Nothing excessive. Simply expensive. "What can I help you with?" she asked. Gary handed her several property sketches. "I'm evaluating access easements for a future industrial project." She reviewed them carefully, asked intelligent questions. Nothing about the conversation felt forced, nothing suspicious, until she casually looked up. "I've heard your name before." Gary smiled politely. "Engineering is a small community." "No." She studied him. "Somewhere else." Only for an instant. Then her expression returned to normal. "I'm sorry. I must be mistaken." The consultation continued another 20 minutes. Completely professional. No mention of Stonegate, no mention of Ethan Brooks. As Gary prepared to leave, he thanked her for her time. "My assistant will send the engagement documents if you decide to proceed." "I appreciate it." He reached the hallway, then stopped. A familiar voice echoed from farther inside the office. "Rebecca?" Gary recognized it immediately. The silver-haired man from the surveillance footage. He remained out of sight. Rebecca answered from behind her office door. "I'll be right there." Gary walked calmly toward the elevators. The doors opened. He stepped inside. Just before they closed, he caught one clear glimpse down the corridor. The silver-haired man entered Rebecca Holloway's office carrying the same black leather portfolio visible in the surveillance video. Gary never looked back. That evening, he compared the office photograph, the surveillance footage, and the memory he had just witnessed. Same height, same posture, same face, different days, different locations, one individual. His identity remained unknown. But now Gary knew something much more important. The mysterious man wasn't merely connected to Ethan Brooks. He had direct access to Rebecca Holloway. At 8:26 p.m., Gary's secure phone vibrated again. This time the message came from Detective Laura Bennett. Only 6 words appeared on the screen. "Leave your house, right now." Gary read Laura Bennett's message twice. "Leave your house, right now." No explanation, no punctuation beyond the period. That alone told him the message had not been written casually. Laura rarely used urgency unless she had already verified the facts herself. Gary stood immediately. Not because he panicked, because experience had taught him that hesitation wasted options. He quietly climbed the stairs. Hannah sat on the bedroom floor beside an open suitcase. Business clothes lay folded in careful stacks. "So," she smiled, "I figured I'd pack tonight instead of tomorrow." Gary nodded. "That's efficient. You look pale." "Long day." "You sure you're okay?" "I've had worse." She stood and walked toward him. For a brief second, she studied his face. "I was thinking maybe after this retreat we should finally take a vacation." Gary smiled politely. "That sounds nice." It surprised him how naturally the words came. His mind, however, remained entirely elsewhere. Laura had not written, "Be careful." She had written, "Leave." Those 2 words carried completely different meanings. Gary checked his watch. 8:31 p.m. "I forgot something in the truck." "This late?" "I left project files inside." "I'll wait up." He nodded and walked downstairs without rushing. Outside, the summer air felt unusually still. No wind, no distant traffic, only crickets somewhere beyond the neighboring yards. Gary unlocked his pickup. Instead of climbing inside, he walked casually around the driveway as though searching for paperwork. Nothing. He opened the driver's door, reached inside, then stopped. His phone vibrated again. Laura. He answered immediately. "Where are you?" "Outside." "Good. What's happening?" "Do not go back inside." Gary's eyes lifted toward the second-floor bedroom. Through the curtains, he could see Hannah moving around the room. "What am I looking for?" "We received information 15 minutes ago." "From whom?" "I can't disclose." "What kind of information?" Laura lowered her voice. "Someone entered your property today. Gary remained perfectly still. When? Approximately 1:40 this afternoon. I was downtown. I know. Hannah. She wasn't home either. Gary's pulse remained steady. Forced entry? No. Then how? We don't know. Was anything stolen? We don't think that's why they went. Gary slowly turned toward the front porch. Everything appeared normal. Lights, flowers, mailbox, nothing disturbed. Laura continued. A patrol unit is 2 minutes away. I'm looking at my house. Stay outside. Is Hannah in danger? We honestly don't know. Gary looked again toward the upstairs window. Hannah was still folding clothes, completely unaware. Laura. Yes. If someone entered the house this afternoon, they had several hours before either of you returned. Gary ended the call. Not because he ignored instructions, because every second mattered. He walked quickly back inside. Hannah. She leaned over the upstairs railing. What happened? We need to leave. Her expression changed immediately. What? Now. Gary. No questions. His tone stopped her. She had heard that voice only twice during their marriage. Both times had involved life-threatening construction accidents. She grabbed her purse without another word. They reached the front porch just as 2 unmarked police SUVs rolled onto the street. Detective Laura Bennett stepped out first. Behind her came 2 crime scene technicians carrying equipment cases. Hannah stared in confusion. Gary? What is this? Laura approached calmly. Mrs. Young? Detective. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Inconvenience? What happened? Laura looked toward Gary. I'll explain what I can. She motioned both of them towards the driveway. Crime scene personnel entered the house wearing gloves. One technician photographed the front door. Another dusted the doorknob. Hannah's confusion quickly became anxiety. Gary, why are they inside our house? He answered honestly. I don't know yet. Laura folded her arms. We received credible information that someone may have entered your residence earlier today. Hannah blinked. Entered? We're verifying that? But nothing's missing. We're not looking for theft. The sentence seemed to unsettle Hannah more than the investigation itself. What else would they be looking for? Laura didn't answer. Instead, she asked gently, Mrs. Young, has anyone recently repaired your internet service? No. Electrical work? No. Cleaning company? No. Any deliveries inside the home? I don't think so. Laura nodded thoughtfully. 25 minutes later, a technician emerged from the front door carrying a small, transparent evidence container. Inside rested an object barely larger than a coin. Gary couldn't identify it from the driveway. Laura walked over. The technician spoke quietly. She frowned, then looked directly toward Gary. Come here. He approached. Inside the container sat a tiny black electronic device. Magnetic backing, flat battery, thin antenna. Gary recognized it immediately. A transmitter. Laura nodded. Likely. Hannah's face lost all color. What? Laura held the container higher. We found it attached beneath your office desk. My office. Gary remained silent. The device had not been placed randomly. Someone had chosen the one room where he kept engineering contracts, financial records, and forensic files. Not the bedroom, not the living room. His office. Laura looked toward Hannah. Has anyone besides your husband used that room? No. Ever. Friends have visited. Recently. She hesitated, then slowly shook her head. No. Another technician approached carrying a second evidence bag. This was under the bookshelf. Laura stared, then exhaled quietly. Another transmitter, 2 devices, different locations, installed deliberately. Hannah whispered, "Oh my God." Laura turned toward Gary. They weren't just watching. They were listening. Gary looked back at the house. Someone had entered while both occupants were absent, installed surveillance equipment, left without disturbing anything. Professional, efficient, patient. Exactly like the person who scrubbed the surveillance photograph. Laura spoke again. The lab will determine how long they've been active. Can they tell? Usually. Hannah wrapped her arms around herself. I don't understand. Neither did Gary. Not completely. If someone wanted information from his office, why not simply steal his computer? Why install hidden transmitters? Unless... They expected future conversations, future discoveries, future evidence. The devices were waiting, not collecting history, collecting tomorrow. Laura asked another question. Gary! When was the last time you discussed Stonegate inside your office? He thought carefully. 3 nights ago. With whom? Myself. Laura looked surprised. I was organizing notes. No phone calls. No. No visitors. No. She wrote something into her notebook. Interesting. The transmitters might have been installed after that evening, meaning someone knew Gary had begun investigating. But how his encrypted communications remained secure, his notebook never left his possession. His searches occurred on isolated systems. Only a handful of people even knew he was asking questions. Detective Laura Bennett, Rebecca Holloway, possibly Ethan Brooks, and whoever continued sending anonymous warnings. One group or several? No way to know yet. At nearly 10:30, the crime scene team finished. Laura approached Gary privately. We recovered partial footwear impressions. Useful? Maybe. What about fingerprints? Too clean. Professionals? Probably. She handed him a sealed property receipt. Don't enter the office until we're done processing tomorrow morning. Gary nodded. Then Laura lowered her voice. I need you to answer one question honestly. I'm listening. Did you tell anyone about tomorrow's meeting with Rebecca Holloway? No. No calendar invitations. No. No emails. No. She studied him carefully. Then someone is reading your movements another way. Before Gary could respond, Hannah walked toward them. She still looked shaken. Detective, Laura turned. Yes. Can I ask something? Of course. Hannah swallowed. If somebody wanted information from Gary, she hesitated. Why didn't they come after him instead? Laura looked directly into her eyes. Because people who install listening devices usually want the truth. The truth. They don't trust what people choose to tell them. Silence settled over the driveway. That answer lingered in Gary's thoughts long after the police vehicles disappeared. Someone had invested significant time, money, and risk to hear private conversations inside his office, which meant those conversations possessed value. But value to whom? Near midnight, after temporarily relocating to a nearby hotel recommended by Laura, Gary unpacked only a small overnight bag. The hotel room overlooked the Monongahela River, quiet, anonymous, safe enough. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. I feel like I'm living inside someone else's life. Gary poured 2 glasses of water. So do I. She accepted the glass. Do you think this has anything to do with your engineering projects? I don't know. You've never hidden work from me. I haven't. She nodded slowly. I believe you. Gary looked at her. She appeared genuinely frightened, not defensive, not calculating, only exhausted. At exactly 12:17 a.m., while Hannah finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, Gary's secure laptop emitted a single notification. A new encrypted file had arrived. No sender, no subject, only one attachment. This time it wasn't a photograph. It was a 38-second audio recording. Gary stared at the encrypted attachment for several seconds before opening it. He disconnected the hotel Wi-Fi, activated the secure offline environment on his forensic laptop, copied the file. Only then did he press play. At first, nothing. Just the low mechanical hum of an air conditioning system. A chair scraped lightly across a hardwood floor. Someone poured liquid into a glass. Then a man's voice spoke. Calm, educated, older than 50. We underestimated him? Another voice answered almost immediately, younger, confident. He still doesn't know enough. Gary leaned closer. The first speaker continued. He wasn't supposed to meet Rebecca this week. Silent. Ice clinked against crystal. Then the younger man laughed quietly. It doesn't matter. Hannah will keep him occupied. Gary froze. Not because of the words, because of what they implied. Not certainty, not guilt. Only that Hannah's name had been discussed. Nothing more. The older man spoke again. If she becomes a problem. The recording ended. Exactly 38 seconds. No conclusion. No explanation. Just silence. Gary replayed it 3 more times. The speakers never identified themselves. No names, no locations, nothing obvious, only voices. He exported the audio into forensic software, separated the frequencies, removed background noise, enhanced room reflections. One detail emerged immediately. A faint announcement echoed somewhere in the distance. Departing from Gate 22. Gary listened again. Airport. The conversation had taken place near an airport lounge, possibly inside a private executive terminal. Interesting. He marked the observation, nothing more. Across the room, Hannah shifted beneath the blankets. She remained asleep. Gary looked at her for a long moment. The recording had mentioned her. That alone proved nothing. Anyone investigating him would naturally know the name of his wife. The mistake would be assuming knowledge equaled involvement. He closed the laptop. At 7 the following morning, Detective Laura Bennett arrived at the hotel carrying coffee. You look terrible. I've slept less. She noticed the laptop already open. Something new? Gary nodded. I received another anonymous file. Laura sighed. Let me guess. You won't like it. She listened to the recording twice, then a third time through headphones. Finally, she removed them. I recognize one of the voices. Gary looked up. You do? Not personally. But I've heard him. When? Laura stared through the hotel window. 3 years ago. She reached for her phone. Opened an archived investigation. Several photographs appeared. Old newspaper clippings, federal courthouse, financial fraud, corporate bribery. She enlarged one image. A silver-haired man exited the courthouse beside a defense attorney. Gary immediately recognized him. The man from Rebecca Holloway's office. Laura nodded. His name is Charles Whitaker. Gary repeated it quietly. Charles Whitaker, former executive vice president of Stonegate Infrastructure. Gary's attention sharpened. He resigned after a federal corruption investigation. Was he charged? No. Witness? No. Then why resign? Laura locked her phone. Because every other executive around him did. Gary understood. Sometimes surviving an investigation required nothing more than staying just outside its legal boundaries. What happened to Stonegate? The company restructured. New ownership. Different board. Same money. Gary considered the words carefully. And Ethan Brooks? Laura nodded slowly. Ethan worked there after law school? As legal counsel? Corporate acquisitions. Gary leaned back. Until now, Stonegate had seemed like scattered coincidences. Now the lines connected. Charles Whitaker, Rebecca Holloway, Ethan Brooks, the surveillance, the anonymous warnings. Still no proof, only structure. Laura finished her coffee. I requested financial records. For whom? Whitaker. And they're sealed. Court order. No. Federal confidentiality? Gary frowned. That usually means ongoing cooperation. Or ongoing investigation. She stood. I have one favor to ask. What is it? If anyone contacts you directly, I record everything. No. Laura looked him directly in the eyes. I want you to meet them. Gary raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. It is. So why? Because whoever keeps sending anonymous evidence is trying very hard to stay invisible. You want them exposed. I want them alive. The statement lingered. Alive. Not protected. Not arrested. Alive. Someone else wanted this person silenced. Laura left shortly afterward. Gary remained alone. His thoughts returned repeatedly to one sentence from the recording. Hannah will keep him occupied. Occupied. Not manipulated. Not controlled. Not assisting. Merely occupying his attention. There was an important distinction. Late that morning, Hannah prepared to leave for the leadership retreat in Seven Springs. She zipped her suitcase. I'll only be gone until tomorrow evening. Gary helped carry the luggage downstairs. You'll call? Of course, she smiled. I hate leaving after everything that happened. I know. She hesitated. Gary? Yes. Do you think we're safe? He answered honestly. I think we're being watched. She looked frightened, but I also think whoever's watching doesn't want violence. What makes you say that? They've had opportunities. She nodded slowly. I wish I understood. So do I. He drove her to the resort shuttle departure point near downtown Pittsburgh. Business executives filled the lobby. Conference badges, suitcases, morning coffee. Ordinary life. Hannah hugged him briefly. I'll see you tomorrow. Travel safely. She boarded the shuttle. Gary watched until it disappeared into traffic. Then he checked his watch. 9:42 a.m. Exactly 5 minutes later, another vehicle entered the terminal parking area. Black Lincoln sedan, government plates. The rear passenger stepped out. Charles Whitaker. Gary remained inside his truck. Whitaker wasn't carrying luggage. He walked directly into the terminal. Interesting. 7 minutes later, Ethan Brooks arrived separately. No greeting, no conversation. He entered through another entrance. Gary's heartbeat slowed. Two connected individuals. Same location. Minutes apart. Coincidence remained possible. He refused to assume otherwise. Instead, he followed the evidence. He entered the terminal cafe, ordered coffee, selected a table with a clear view of the main lobby. At 10:03, Rebecca Holloway walked inside. Now 3 people. 3 separate arrivals, each pretending not to know the others, Gary observed quietly. Whitaker disappeared through a restricted access hallway. Rebecca followed 4 minutes later. Ethan entered last. No words exchanged, no eye contact, professional tradecraft. Then something unexpected happened. A 4th person entered, Detective Laura Bennett. Gary nearly stood. She wasn't in uniform. She carried only a leather briefcase. Laura walked directly toward the restricted hallway. A security guard checked her identification. She disappeared inside. Gary's mind raced. She hadn't mentioned this meeting. Why had she known Whitaker would be here? Was she investigating him or working with him? Gary forced himself to breathe slowly. Facts. Only facts. Laura entered the same restricted area. Nothing more. No conclusions. 22 minutes later, Ethan Brooks exited first. His expression remained composed. He spoke briefly with someone on his phone, then left. Rebecca Holloway departed next. Whitaker remained inside. Laura emerged last. She appeared tired. As she crossed the lobby, her eyes briefly swept across the cafe. For less than half a second, they met Gary's. Recognition flashed across her face, almost imperceptibly. She continued walking without acknowledging him. exactly as though she had never seen him. Professional. Gary remained seated another 10 minutes. Then his phone vibrated. A text from Laura. Not here. Meet me at Point State Park. 1 hour, no calls. Gary deleted the message immediately. He arrived at Point State Park precisely at 11:30. Laura sat alone on a bench overlooking the rivers. No police vehicle, no visible surveillance. She didn't speak until he sat beside her. You shouldn't have followed them. I observed. You observed me too. Yes. She looked almost amused. I wondered how long it would take. So, I was there under federal request. Gary remained silent. Charles Whitaker has been cooperating for nearly 18 months. Gary blinked. Cooperating. With investigators. So he's not running the operation. We don't believe so. Then why was he meeting Rebecca and Ethan? Laura stared across the water. Because someone inside Stonegate is still moving money. Gary frowned. Stonegate barely exists. Exactly. He understood. Corporate shells, holding companies, asset transfers. A company could disappear on paper while continuing to exist financially through dozens of subsidiaries. Laura continued. Whitaker believes someone is laundering commercial property acquisitions. Through Rebecca. We don't know. Ethan? We don't know. Hannah? Laura turned sharply. No. Her answer came too quickly, too firmly. Gary noticed. You sound certain. I am. Based on what? Laura hesitated, then reached into her briefcase. She handed him a sealed envelope. Inside rested a stack of printed bank records. The account holder's name stopped Gary cold. Hannah Young, his wife. The transactions totaled nearly $200,000, yet every deposit line carried the same notation. Returned, rejected, account refused. Gary slowly looked up. Laura spoke quietly. Someone has been trying to pay your wife, and she never accepted a single dollar. Gary stared at the records in disbelief. Before he could say another word, Laura's phone rang. She answered. Her expression changed instantly. What? She stood. When? She listened for several seconds, then looked directly at Gary. They've found Charles Whitaker. Where? Laura swallowed. He's dead. For almost 5 full seconds, Gary said nothing. The words settled between him and Laura like concrete. Charles Whitaker is dead. Only minutes earlier, Whitaker had been one of the few people capable of explaining how Stonegate still operated behind layers of shell corporations. Now that possibility had disappeared. Laura lowered her phone. They found him in the underground parking structure beneath the Gateway Commerce Center. Cause of death? Single gunshot? Execution? We don't know yet. Gary studied her face. She was choosing every word carefully. You're holding something back. I don't have confirmation. What do you suspect? Laura looked toward the river before answering. I think he was killed less than 30 minutes after leaving the airport terminal. Gary mentally reconstructed the morning. Whitaker, Rebecca, Ethan, Laura, each arriving separately, each leaving separately. Then, Whitaker dead. Someone had known exactly where he would be. Laura's phone rang again. She answered briefly. I'm on my way. She ended the call. I have to leave. Gary nodded. Stay available. I always am. She hesitated before walking away. Gary? He looked up. If anyone contacts you anonymously today. I know? Listen before you speak. After she disappeared into traffic, Gary remained on the bench another 10 minutes. His thoughts stayed disciplined. Whitaker had been cooperating with investigators. Someone had tried paying Hannah. Listening devices had been installed in his office. Anonymous evidence continued arriving. Every event pointed toward a single conclusion. Someone inside the conspiracy wanted the organization exposed. Someone else wanted every witness eliminated. Those two forces were now colliding. Gary drove directly to his engineering office. The crime scene tape had already been removed. Inside, everything appeared exactly as before. Desk, bookshelves, blueprint cabinets, coffee mug, nothing visibly disturbed. Yet the room no longer felt private. He opened a locked cabinet beneath his drafting table. Inside sat 3 portable storage drives. One contained engineering contracts, one held structural models. The third had no label. Gary inserted the unlabeled drive. An encrypted archive opened. Construction permits, property ownership histories, commercial zoning maps, thousands of pages collected over 6 years. Not because Gary suspected corruption, because documenting ownership patterns had become an unexpected hobby after discovering repeated inconsistencies in municipal filings. Most people relaxed by watching television. Gary organized public records. His methodical personality had transformed curiosity into an extraordinary private database. He searched one phrase. Stonegate. 37 properties appeared, too many. He narrowed the search. Charles Whitaker, 7 properties. Rebecca Holloway, 5. Ethan Brooks, 3. Then he entered another name. Hannah Young. Nothing. Exactly as expected. She owned no commercial interests connected to Stonegate. Gary continued searching. The anonymous deposits into Hannah's account bothered him. Not because they existed, because they had all been rejected. Someone had attempted to move money into her account repeatedly. Why? Bribe payment trap. The answer depended entirely upon who initiated the transfers. His office phone rang. Almost nobody used that number anymore. He answered. Gary Young. Silence. Static. Then a woman's voice. Not Laura, not Rebecca. Older, calm. Mr. Young? I'm listening. You've been asking the wrong question. Gary picked up a pen. What should I ask instead? You keep asking who wants your wife. She paused. You should ask who she's been protecting. The line disconnected. Gary immediately checked the caller identification. Blocked, no number, no trace. He replayed the conversation from memory. Who she's been protecting. Not working with. Not betraying him for. Protecting. Again, language mattered. He wrote the sentence into his notebook without interpretation. Evidence first, meaning later. Half an hour afterward, his secure email received another anonymous message. No attachment, only one sentence. Search the Maple District warehouse permits. Gary opened his property archive again. Maple District, warehouse permits. 4 addresses appeared. 3 belonged to active logistics companies. 1 had been demolished 9 years earlier, except the demolition permit lacked a completion certificate. Interesting. Gary opened aerial photographs. The building still existed, abandoned, but standing. Its ownership history revealed something unusual. The property had changed hands 8 times in 11 years. Every purchasing company dissolved within 18 months. Classic layering, a technique used to conceal beneficial ownership. Gary printed every document, then called Laura. No answer. He left a brief voicemail. I found a warehouse connected to repeated shell transfers. Call when available. Less than 5 minutes later, Rebecca Holloway called. Gary stared at the screen. He almost ignored it. Instead, he answered. Rebecca, I need to see you. When? Immediately. What happened? I can't discuss it over the phone. Where? My office. Gary remained silent. Rebecca lowered her voice. If you trust Detective Bennett. I do? Then come now. The call ended. Gary considered his options. Rebecca had voluntarily involved herself in the investigation from the beginning. She had never asked for money, never attempted manipulation, never contradicted verified evidence. He decided to go. Her office occupied the 12th floor, overlooking downtown Pittsburgh. When Gary entered, Rebecca locked the door herself. No assistant, no receptionist, only the 2 of them. She placed a thick folder on the conference table. I wasn't going to show anyone this. Gary waited. Charles Whitaker changed that. She opened the folder. Inside lay photocopies of legal correspondence spanning nearly 12 years. Purchase agreements, trust documents, corporate minutes. Gary noticed one signature appearing repeatedly. Nathan Mercer. Who is that? Rebecca answered quietly. The man who actually controls everything. Gary frowned. I've never heard his name. That's the point. She slid another page toward him. Nathan Mercer, chairman, Meridian Asset Holdings. Gary searched his memory. Meridian, a modest real estate investment firm. Nothing remarkable. Rebecca shook her head. That's what the public believes. She produced a chart. Dozens of corporations branched outward from Meridian. Construction firms, property managers, insurance companies, investment funds, development partnerships. Eventually, one branch reached Stonegate Infrastructure. Another reached 3 companies Gary had already investigated. A third reached the abandoned Maple District warehouse. Rebecca tapped the page. Meridian owns almost nothing directly. It owns companies that own companies. Exactly. Gary studied the structure. Remarkably elegant. Almost impossible to follow without years of documentation. Rebecca continued. Whitaker spent 18 months helping federal investigators untangle this. And now he's dead. She nodded. He knew he wouldn't survive forever. Gary looked up. How long have you known? That he was cooperating? Yes, almost a year. You never said anything. I couldn't. Attorney-client privilege, legal restrictions, federal confidentiality. Gary understood. What about Ethan Brooks? Rebecca hesitated. I honestly don't know anymore. You hired him. I did. I trusted him. Her voice carried genuine disappointment. But recently... What? He started asking strange questions. What kind? Questions about my meetings. My schedule. My archived files. Gary felt another piece slide into place. If Ethan knew you were meeting me, he could predict where I'd be. And Whitaker? Rebecca nodded slowly. But suspicion isn't evidence. Gary appreciated that answer. She was thinking like an attorney. He asked another question. What about Hannah? Rebecca looked confused. What about her? Gary explained the rejected bank deposits, the anonymous recording, the strange phone call. Rebecca listened carefully. When he finished, she spoke without hesitation. I've reviewed Hannah's banking history. Gary looked surprised. You what? With her written authorization? When? Yesterday morning. Gary stared. She authorized you. She insisted. Rebecca reached into another folder. Hannah came to me before you arrived. Gary felt the room become strangely quiet. Why? Because she thought someone was trying to frame her. Rebecca handed him a signed authorization form, dated 3 days earlier, bearing Hannah's unmistakable signature. Gary read every line. Hannah had voluntarily requested a forensic financial review before Gary even knew suspicious deposits existed. She had suspected something herself. Rebecca spoke gently. She was terrified. But she refused to tell you. Why? Because whoever was targeting her had already threatened someone else. Gary slowly lowered the document. Who? Rebecca answered with visible reluctance. Her younger brother. Gary blinked. Evan, Rebecca nodded. They sent him photographs. What photographs? Him leaving elementary school with his daughter? Gary's heartbeat slowed. Hannah's younger brother, Evan Carter, lived in Columbus, Ohio. He taught 8th grade history. He had no connection to Stonegate. Rebecca continued. They never demanded money. They demanded silence. Silence about what? Rebecca looked directly at Gary. They believed Hannah had seen something. What? We still don't know. Gary sat back. everything changed. If Hannah had been protecting her brother instead of herself, if she had sought legal help before Gary discovered anything, then many of his assumptions had been wrong. Not all. But enough. Rebecca quietly closed the folder. I think Hannah has been carrying a secret for months. Not because she's guilty, because she believed telling the truth would get her family killed. Before Gary could respond, every light inside the office flickered once, then twice. The building lost power. Emergency lighting illuminated the room in dim red. Rebecca looked toward the hallway. A second later, somewhere outside the office, a woman screamed. The scream echoed through the emergency-lit hallway. Rebecca instinctively reached for the office door. Gary caught her wrist. Wait. She looked at him. What? If someone cut the power intentionally, running into the hallway is exactly what they expect. She nodded immediately. The panic outside intensified. Doors opened. People shouted over one another. The emergency generator had restored only dim red lighting, leaving the 12th floor wrapped in long shadows. Gary crossed quietly to the office window. Downtown Pittsburgh continued moving below. Traffic lights worked, street lights remained on. Buildings across the avenue still had electricity. The outage is only this building, he said. Rebecca understood at once. Localized. Yes. Not a citywide failure. Someone had disabled this building alone. Her cell phone displayed no service. Gary checked his. The same. No signal. Rebecca shook her head. Nothing? Too convenient. Gary walked toward the conference table. Instead of searching for weapons, he searched for exits. Every office building had emergency evacuation diagrams. He found one mounted beside the copy room. 2 stairwells. North, south. The elevators had automatically shut down. Rebecca whispered, "The parking garage is beneath the south stairwell." Gary studied the map. The same garage where Whitaker was found? Yes. He folded the evacuation map into his pocket. Another scream came from farther down the corridor. This one ended abruptly. Then silence. Neither of them moved. Gary wasn't afraid of silence. Silence usually meant people had started making decisions. He opened the office door only an inch. The hallway remained empty. Several office doors stood open. Emergency lights flickered. A brief smell of burned electrical insulation drifted through the corridor. Nothing else. Rebecca whispered behind him. Do you see anyone? No. Gary listened. Footsteps. Not running. Measured. Heavy. Someone approaching from the north hallway. He quietly closed the office door again. They're coming. Who? I don't know. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Neither Gary nor Rebecca breathed. A gentle knock followed. 3 slow taps. No voice. Just another 3 taps. Rebecca's face had gone pale. Gary pointed silently towards the conference room. She moved without argument. The knocking came again, then stopped. 30 seconds passed. 1 minute. Nothing. Gary counted silently. At 90 seconds, he opened the door another inch. The hallway was empty. On the carpet lay a small brown envelope. Nothing else. He picked it up. No name, no address, only a handwritten message on the front. For Gary only. Rebecca watched him open it. Inside rested a single security access card. Alongside it sat a folded note. Warehouse B. Tonight. 11:00 p.m. Come alone. Bring the engineering archive. Burn this. Gary read it twice. No signature, no fingerprints visible. Rebecca stared at the card. That's impossible. What is... She turned the card over. This belongs to the Maple District warehouse. Gary looked back at her. The same warehouse from the anonymous email. Rebecca nodded. I represented the property transfer years ago. You recognize the access badge. I prepared the paperwork. Gary placed everything into an evidence envelope from Rebecca's office supply cabinet. He never touched the card directly again. Don't burn the note. No. He smiled faintly. I rarely follow anonymous instructions. Rebecca almost smiled back. Almost? The building lights suddenly returned. Bright fluorescent fixtures flooded the office. Cellular service returned immediately. Laura called before Gary could dial her. Where are you? Rebecca's office. Stay there. What happened? The building lockdown wasn't caused by an electrical problem. Gary expected that answer. What then? Someone activated the fire suppression security protocol from inside the maintenance control room. So it was intentional. Yes. Laura continued. No fire. No explosion. Just enough disruption to clear surveillance footage during a critical 12-minute window. Gary understood immediately. 12 minutes. Enough time to move. Enough time to plant evidence. Enough time to disappear. Laura asked another question. Did anyone contact you? Gary looked toward the evidence envelope. Yes. What did they leave? An invitation. Silence. Laura spoke carefully. Don't accept it. Gary didn't answer immediately. I said don't. I heard you. Gary? They want something. They always want something. I know. She lowered her voice. We recovered Whitaker's phone. Gary waited. It contains one unsent text message. To whom? You. Gary's eyes narrowed. What does it say? Laura read slowly. If you're reading this, trust Hannah before anyone else. The sentence struck Gary harder than Whitaker's death itself. Not trust Rebecca. Not trust the investigation. Trust Hannah. Laura continued. The message was never sent. When was it written? Approximately 11 minutes before his death. Gary thanked her and ended the call. Rebecca had heard enough. He trusted Hannah? Gary nodded. So why? Rebecca answered honestly. I don't know. Neither did Gary. But Whitaker had died attempting to leave one final instruction. That mattered. Gary finally called Hannah. She answered immediately. Gary, you sound nervous. I've been trying to reach you. The conference was canceled. Canceled. Half the executive team suddenly left after lunch. Her voice trembled slightly. I don't think anyone wanted us here. Gary chose his words carefully. Where are you now? Still at the resort. When are you coming home? In about an hour. Gary almost told her everything. Instead, he asked one question, Hannah. Yes. Has anyone ever tried giving you money? Long silence. When she finally answered, her voice had changed completely. You know? Answer me. Yes. Who? I don't know. When? Months ago. Why didn't you tell me? I was afraid. Of what? She whispered. They knew where Evan's daughter went to school. Gary closed his eyes. Rebecca had told the truth. Every word. Hannah continued. I thought if I ignored them, they would stop. Did they? No. What did they want? They kept asking the same question. Gary tightened his grip on the phone. What question? They wanted to know if I still had the flash drive. Gary felt his heartbeat slow. The what? I don't have it. What flash drive? I never saw one. They didn't believe me. Gary remained silent. This was the first time Hannah had mentioned any physical evidence. He asked quietly, When did this start? About 8 months ago. What happened 8 months ago? Another pause. Then Hannah answered, I accidentally witnessed something. What? I don't know exactly. Hannah? I parked beside an abandoned warehouse after getting lost. Gary's attention sharpened. The Maple District warehouse. Yes. She sounded surprised. How did you know? Gary didn't answer. Instead, he asked the next question. What did you see? There were trucks. Late at night. Several men moving boxes. I wasn't paying attention. Then one of them dropped something. What? A small black flash drive. You picked it up? No? I drove away. But someone saw my license plate. Gary felt every piece beginning to align. The warehouse, the anonymous threats, the rejected payments, the surveillance. Someone believed Hannah possessed evidence she had never actually taken. Hannah, listen carefully. I need you to stay exactly where you are. I'm already leaving. No, I don't think that's safe. She hesitated. I don't feel safe here either. Gary looked toward Rebecca. She immediately understood. The resort. She opened her laptop, typed quickly. Less than 30 seconds later, she looked up. The ownership records. What about them? The Seven Springs Executive Retreat. She turned the screen toward Gary. Owner. Meridian Hospitality Holdings. Gary didn't need to read any further. Meridian, Nathan Mercer's network. The conference Hannah attended had been held inside property controlled by the same corporate structure connected to Stonegate. Gary spoke firmly into the phone. Hannah, get out of the main building. Walk toward the public parking area. Stay where other people can see you. I'll come get you. I'll leave now. She hung up. Gary and Rebecca were already moving. They entered the elevator just as Detective Laura Bennett stepped out onto the 12th floor. She saw Gary heading toward the lobby. Where are you going? To Hannah. Laura blocked the elevator doors. No. They're expecting that. Gary met her eyes. They've already found her. Laura understood immediately. What happened? Gary answered without hesitation. The resort where she's staying belongs to Meridian. Laura's expression hardened. She reached for her radio. At that exact moment, another officer sprinted across the lobby toward her. Bennett? She turned. What? We've got another body. Where? Maple District Warehouse. Laura's face became completely still. Who is it? The young officer swallowed. We think... He looked toward Gary before finishing. It's Ethan Brooks. Laura did not waste a second. Nobody leaves. Her voice cut through the lobby with the sharp precision of someone accustomed to making decisions under pressure. The young officer handed her a tablet displaying the first photographs from the Maple District warehouse. Gary remained several feet away. He had no desire to contaminate an active investigation, but Laura quietly turned the screen toward him. The body lay beside a loading dock. Dark suit, white shirt, one arm stretched toward a fallen flashlight. The face was partially visible. Gary recognized Ethan Brooks immediately. His expression carried neither satisfaction nor anger, only disappointment. Rebecca stepped closer. Is it him? Laura nodded once. Preliminary identification. Rebecca closed her eyes. I hired him 6 years ago. No disciplinary record. No financial issues. No complaints. Laura looked at her. Sometimes that's exactly why they're recruited. Rebecca said nothing. Gary continued studying the photograph. Something felt wrong. Not the body, the position. He looked at Laura. Has the medical examiner arrived? Not yet. Then don't let anyone move him. She frowned. No one intends to. Gary pointed toward the image. His right hand. Laura enlarged the photograph. Ethan's fingers remained tightly curled, almost clenched. What about it? He didn't die reaching for the flashlight. Laura leaned closer. Why? Look at the dust. The loading dock floor had collected years of gray industrial dust. Every object around Ethan left clear impressions, except the flashlight. It rested unnaturally clean, recently placed. Laura immediately understood. You think the scene was staged? I think someone wanted investigators to believe he found something. She zoomed farther. Now another detail became obvious. No drag marks, no disturbed dust between Ethan and the flashlight. The object had indeed been placed after his death. Laura called the crime scene commander immediately. Nobody touches anything until I arrive. She ended the call, then turned to Gary. You just saved us several hours. Gary shook his head. I only noticed what didn't fit. Laura looked at him thoughtfully. You've been doing that since this started. He didn't answer. Because she was right. He noticed inconsistencies, not because he expected crime, because engineering trained people to recognize impossible patterns. Buildings either balanced or they failed. Documents either aligned or they contradicted one another. Facts followed the same rules. Laura slipped the tablet into her bag. I'm going to the warehouse. Gary already knew what she would say next. You stay away. Rebecca spoke before he could respond. He's going to Hannah. Laura sighed. I was afraid of that. She's alone. I know, and someone believes she has evidence. I know that too. Laura looked at both of them. Then listen carefully. She lowered her voice. Every major law enforcement agency connected to this investigation believes tonight will force the organization into the open. Gary remained silent. Laura continued. Whitaker's murder accelerated everything. Ethan's death confirms internal panic. People who spent years hiding are now making mistakes. Rebecca folded her arms. What aren't you telling us? Laura hesitated. Then she made a decision. Federal prosecutors approved emergency warrants this afternoon. Gary looked up. Against whom? 7 corporate executives. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. Already? They've been preparing for months. Today's murders pushed the timeline forward. Gary considered that carefully. Justice had already begun moving. His role was no longer exposing corruption. His responsibility had become protecting Hannah until the system finished its work. Laura pointed toward him. That's why I need you alive. Gary nodded. I understand. No heroics. I wasn't planning any. Laura almost smiled. I've heard that before. She left with 2 detectives. Within seconds, she disappeared into an unmarked SUV, racing toward the warehouse. Rebecca watched the vehicles leave. The entire case just changed. It already had. Gary checked his watch. Hannah should have left the resort 20 minutes earlier. He called again. No answer. He tried once more. Straight to voicemail. His heartbeat remained steady. Panic solved nothing. He called a third time. Again, voicemail. Rebecca noticed his expression. No answer. No. She immediately opened another browser window. The resort uses valet parking. So, if Hannah requested her car... Rebecca searched quickly. There might be a timestamp. She logged into a legal property portal, using credentials Gary assumed belonged to her law firm. After several minutes, she located an employee directory, 1 phone number. She called. A young valet answered. Rebecca identified herself as legal counsel. Within moments, she had confirmation. She covered the receiver. Hannah picked up her vehicle. What time? 36 minutes ago. Gary calculated the driving distance. She should already have reached the interstate, unless... Rebecca asked another question. The valet answered. She slowly lowered the phone. What? He said Hannah never drove away. Gary felt something tighten inside his chest. What do you mean? The valet handed her the keys. She walked toward the parking lot. Then another guest approached her. They spoke. And the valet went inside. When he came back, Hannah's vehicle was gone. Did he see who drove it? No. Gary asked the question that mattered most. Did Hannah drive? Rebecca repeated it. The valet answered almost immediately. No. Gary took the phone. This is Gary Young. I need you to think carefully. The man who approached my wife. What did he look like? The young valet hesitated. Middle-aged. Gray jacket. Dark baseball cap. About 6 feet tall. Anything unusual? He walked like... The valet searched for the word. Like an old military guy. Gary thanked him, then called Laura. She answered while driving. What is it? Hannah disappeared. Laura became instantly alert. Explain. Gary repeated everything. When he finished, she said only 4 words. Don't drive there. I'm going. No. We'll issue a statewide alert. They're already moving her. Laura knew he was right. Every passing minute mattered. She changed tactics. If you insist on going, I'm listening. Don't go alone. Gary looked toward Rebecca. She already understood. I'm coming. Laura objected immediately. Absolutely not. Rebecca answered before Gary could. I know the warehouse records. I know the corporate structure. And apparently everyone wants me dead anyway. Laura was silent. Then finally said, I'll have state police intercept both of you near Somerset. No lights. No sirens. They'll join your convoy. The call ended. Rebecca gathered 3 folders from her office safe. Gary watched. What are those? The original incorporation records. For Meridian. I thought investigators had copies. They have certified copies. She locked the folders into a steel briefcase. These are the originals. Gary stared. You've kept them. For 12 years. Why? Rebecca answered quietly. Because something about Nathan Mercer always frightened me. 20 minutes later, they were heading east along the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Rain had begun falling. Not heavily, just enough to blur headlights across the windshield. Gary drove. Rebecca reviewed documents beside him. Neither spoke much. Silence allowed concentration. After another 30 miles, Gary noticed something unusual in the rearview mirror. A black SUV, maintaining identical distance, never passing, never falling behind. He changed lanes. The SUV changed lanes. He slowed. The SUV slowed. Rebecca noticed. Someone's following us. Gary nodded once. Probably. She looked back. I don't recognize it. He accelerated. The SUV accelerated. Still no attempt to pass. Still maintaining approximately 6 car lengths. Rebecca quietly removed her phone. No service again. Gary checked his own. Nothing. Another dead zone. Too convenient. He took the next highway exit unexpectedly. The SUV followed. He entered a gas station. The SUV continued past without slowing. Rebecca exhaled. Maybe not. Gary kept watching. 30 seconds later, the SUV made a U-turn farther down the road. It came back. Slowly. Very slowly. Then parked across the street. Its headlights remained off. Neither occupant exited. Gary restarted the engine. We're leaving. Now. They've confirmed surveillance. Rebecca fastened her seatbelt. As they pulled back onto the highway, the black SUV followed again, exactly 6 car lengths behind. No closer, no farther. Professional, not emotional. Gary's phone suddenly vibrated. One text message, unknown number. Don't go to the resort. They're bringing Hannah to you. Gary read it twice. Rebecca looked over. Another anonymous message? He nodded. What does it say? Gary handed her the phone. She read the sentence, then looked into the mirror at the black SUV. Her expression slowly changed. What if... Gary glanced sideways. What? What if that's not the people hunting us? He frowned. Rebecca continued quietly. What if that's the people trying to keep us alive? Before Gary could answer, bright headlights exploded across the median. A pickup truck accelerated directly through the grass divider, crossed into their lane, and came straight toward them at full speed. The pickup truck did not drift across the median. It launched across it. The headlights bounced violently over wet grass before locking directly onto Gary's sedan. Rebecca grabbed the dashboard. Gary. He did not slam on the brakes. Braking would leave them trapped. Instead, he accelerated. The engine answered with a sharp roar as the sedan surged forward. The pickup continued charging. 100 yards, 80, 60. Gary waited. Rebecca wanted to scream. Instead, she trusted the man beside her. 40 yards, 30. At the last possible second, Gary jerked the steering wheel toward the shoulder. The sedan slipped across rain-soaked pavement. The pickup missed them by less than 3 feet. Its driver overcorrected. The truck fishtailed violently. Metal screamed. The vehicle slammed broadside into the steel guardrail before spinning twice across both lanes. Airbags exploded. Glass scattered across the highway. Gary never looked back. "Seatbelt," Rebecca blinked. "I already." "Tighten it." She pulled it once more. The black SUV behind them reacted immediately. Instead of continuing after Gary, it stopped beside the wrecked pickup. 2 men jumped out. Neither carried visible weapons. Both wore dark tactical jackets with reflective state police markings hidden beneath rain shells. Rebecca stared through the rear window. "They're officers." Gary understood. The anonymous text. "They were protecting us." One of the officers waved Gary forward. "Do not stop. Keep moving." Gary accelerated toward the interstate. Only after several miles did he finally breathe normally again. Rebecca broke the silence. "They weren't trying to follow us." "They were escorting us." Gary nodded. "They expected an attack." "Which means Laura knew more than she told us." His phone rang. "Laura." He answered immediately. "You all right?" "We're fine." "I heard the collision over the radio." "It wasn't an accident." "I know." She sounded exhausted. "The pickup was stolen in Ohio yesterday." "Driver. Dead." Gary frowned. "What?" "The driver died during the impact. Identification false. No fingerprints in the system." "Professional. Again," Laura continued. "The officers behind you belong to the Attorney General's protection detail." "You sent them." "No." Gary remained silent. "Then who did?" Laura answered honestly. "I don't know." That unsettled Gary more than anything else. If Laura had not assigned them, someone else with authority had. Someone inside the investigation or someone watching it. "Where's Hannah?" Laura hesitated. "We may have a location." Gary's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Tell me." "A traffic camera captured her SUV." "Where?" "Route 31. Heading west. Toward Pittsburgh." Gary looked at Rebecca. "She wasn't taken to the mountains." Laura continued. "The strange part is this. The vehicle never reached Pittsburgh. It disappeared." "How?" "License plate readers lost it." Gary already knew the answer. "They switched vehicles." "Probably." Laura lowered her voice. "We've requested helicopter support." Gary appreciated the effort. But helicopters searched for moving targets. Professionals rarely kept moving. They hid. Rebecca unfolded one of the original corporate incorporation files. "Gary." He glanced sideways. "What?" "The warehouse." "What about it?" "I've been looking at ownership history." She pointed toward several signatures. The Maple District warehouse changed ownership 6 times. In 12 years. So, every transfer used different companies. Gary waited. "But," Rebecca tapped one signature. "The same notary public authenticated every transaction." Gary slowed slightly. "The same person. Every single time." She handed him the page. Name? Samuel Price. Commissioned notary. Allegheny County. Gary recognized it instantly. Samuel Price. Rebecca looked at him. You know him. He notarized the engineering archive transfer. Rebecca stared. The archive Mercer wanted. Yes. They exchanged a long look. The same legal official had authenticated nearly every important document connected to Meridian. That was not coincidence. Rebecca immediately called her law office. An assistant answered. Melissa, it's Rebecca. I need Samuel Price's current address. The assistant searched. After almost a minute, she replied. He retired. When? About 3 months ago. Address? Another pause. I'm sorry. The record says deceased. Rebecca's expression hardened. When? 7 weeks ago. She slowly lowered the phone. Gary already understood. Natural causes. Rebecca shook her head. No details. But I'm guessing we should ask. Gary nodded. Witnesses, accountants, lawyers, now a notary. The people connecting paper trails kept disappearing. His phone vibrated again. This time from Detective Laura. Not a call, a photograph. It showed Ethan Brooks' clenched hand. Something protruded between 2 fingers. A tiny folded piece of paper investigators had initially missed. Laura's message contained only 6 words. You noticed it before anyone? Seconds later, another image arrived. The paper had been unfolded. Inside were 3 handwritten numbers. November 4th, 27. Nothing else. Rebecca looked confused. A code. Maybe. Gary stared at the numbers. They seemed familiar. Not because of mathematics, because of engineering documentation. He replayed months of reports inside his memory. Then it struck him. The archive. Rebecca looked at him. What? The engineering archive uses section numbers. He spoke slowly. Building? Floor. Storage cabinet. Rebecca immediately understood. 11th building. 4th floor. Cabinet 27. Gary accelerated again. Laura called immediately after receiving his text. You figured it out? I think so. I'm sending officers. No, Gary interrupted. They'll arrive too late. You don't know that. If Mercer knows Ethan left us a clue, he'll destroy it. Laura remained silent. She knew he was right. Fine. I'll redirect everyone. Meet us there. How long? 40 minutes. Gary disconnected. Rebecca checked the GPS. The engineering archive is only 12 miles away. Rain intensified. Traffic disappeared. The old industrial district emerged ahead. Most factories had closed decades earlier. Concrete warehouses stood abandoned. Rust covered everything. Gary parked behind the archive building instead of the front entrance. Old habits never become the obvious target. Rebecca noticed. You expected company. I always do now. The archive building remained exactly as Gary remembered. 3 stories, reinforced concrete, minimal windows, electronic access. He still possessed clearance. His employee badge unlocked the side entrance. Emergency lights illuminated endless rows of steel shelving. Everything smelled like paper dust and machine oil. Rebecca whispered, This place is enormous. Gary nodded. 40 years of engineering history. They climbed narrow metal stairs. 4th floor. Cabinet 27 stood exactly where Gary remembered. Locked. Rebecca examined it. No sign of forced entry. Gary used his access card. The cabinet opened. Inside rested dozens of engineering binders. Nothing else. Rebecca frowned. Wrong cabinet? Gary shook his head. No. He removed every binder carefully, one by one, until only the metal bottom remained. Empty, almost. He tapped the steel floor. Different sound. Hollow. Rebecca heard it too. There's a compartment. Gary found 2 hidden screws. Someone had painted over them years earlier. He removed the panel. Inside rested a waterproof evidence pouch, untouched. Rebecca stared. My God. Gary opened it carefully. Not cash. Not jewelry. Not a flash drive. Original engineering blueprints. Signed construction certifications. Inspection reports. Financial authorization sheets. And one sealed envelope, addressed by hand. If this archive is ever opened, give these documents directly to federal investigators. Trust no corporate attorney. Signed, Daniel Whitaker. Rebecca whispered. He planned this. Gary nodded. Long before he died. The envelope also contained a USB flash drive. Rebecca looked at it. Hannah. Gary understood immediately. The missing flash drive. The one everyone believed Hannah possessed. She had never taken it. Whitaker had hidden it here all along. Someone else had guessed incorrectly. Months of intimidation, threats, surveillance, 2 murders. All because criminals believed Hannah had evidence she had never even touched. Rebecca looked toward Gary. What now? Before he could answer, every light inside the archive building shut off. Complete darkness swallowed the room. A deep metallic clang echoed somewhere below. Not electrical. Mechanical. Someone had locked the exits. Then footsteps began climbing the steel staircase. Slow, unhurried. More than one person. Gary quietly slipped the flash drive into his inside jacket pocket. He handed the envelope to Rebecca. No matter what happens, she looked at him. Don't let them take these. The footsteps stopped just outside the 4th floor landing. A man's calm voice echoed through the darkness. Mr. Young. The voice sounded strangely familiar. I've wanted to meet you properly. Nobody moved. The darkness inside the archive seemed to absorb every sound, except the slow rhythm of rain striking broken skylights above. Gary recognized the voice before he recognized the name. Calm, educated, measured. A man accustomed to negotiating billion-dollar contracts without ever raising his voice. Nathan Mercer. Rebecca's breathing became shallow. So he's finally here. Gary answered quietly. He was always coming. The footsteps resumed. One, then another. Metal stairs echoed beneath polished leather shoes. No hurry, no panic. Whoever approached believed he already controlled the situation. Emergency exit signs cast faint green light across the 4th floor landing. Enough to reveal silhouettes. 3 men. Nathan Mercer stood between 2 larger men wearing dark tactical clothing. Neither displayed a firearm openly. They did not need to. Confidence itself had become a weapon. Mercer smiled. Mr. Young. He looked exactly as newspapers described him. Early 60s, silver hair, tailored charcoal overcoat despite the rain. Perfect posture. The kind of executive whose face appeared beside charitable donations and university buildings. Only Gary knew another version now. The one hidden beneath decades of respectable headlines. Mercer's eyes shifted toward Rebecca. Miss Lawson. She did not answer. I was disappointed when you left the firm. Rebecca's voice remained cold. You murdered Daniel Whitaker. Mercer's expression never changed. No. I merely underestimated how emotional certain people become when business changes. Gary studied him carefully. Mercer had still not asked about the flash drive. Interesting. He did not know whether they had found it. Good. Mercer glanced around the archive. A remarkable building. So many forgotten records. So many misunderstandings preserved on paper. Gary finally spoke. You came yourself. I did. That's unusual. Mercer smiled slightly. You've become unusually important. One of the tactical men stepped forward. Mercer raised one finger. The man stopped immediately. Gary noticed. Mercer controlled disciplined professionals. Not hired street criminals. That explained the precision of every previous attack. Mercer folded his hands behind his back. You've impressed me, Mr. Young. Most people react emotionally after discovering betrayal. You became patient. You collected facts. You followed documents. You trusted institutions. Gary remained silent. Mercer continued. I misjudged you. So did Hannah. For the first time, Gary's eyes narrowed. You know where she is. Mercer tilted his head slightly. I know many things. Rebecca interrupted. Where is she? Mercer ignored her completely. Instead, he looked only at Gary. Tell me. Has she apologized? Gary said nothing. Has she admitted she was wrong? Still silence. Mercer sighed. Interesting. She finally understood your value. Gary answered quietly. My wife's mistakes have nothing to do with you. Mercer almost laughed. They have everything to do with me. Rebecca frowned. What does that mean? Mercer looked toward the rows of engineering files. Human beings rarely betray because they're evil. They betray because someone offers them a better story. A better future. A better version of themselves. He looked directly at Gary. Hannah believed she deserved more. I simply provided opportunities. Gary spoke evenly. You manipulated her. I persuaded her. You lied. I negotiated. Rebecca stepped forward. You ruined families. Mercer looked at her with genuine curiosity. I built an empire. No empire exists without casualties. His words landed with frightening certainty. No remorse, no anger, simply calculation. Gary already understood something important. Mercer truly believed himself innocent. Not legally, morally. That made him far more dangerous. Mercer's attention returned to Gary. I assume you've discovered Daniel's little insurance policy. Gary gave nothing away. Mercer smiled. Good. So the flash drive exists. Rebecca glanced toward Gary instinctively. Mercer's smile widened. There. The smallest movement. I've always admired involuntary honesty. Gary did not react again. Too late. Mercer already knew. One of the tactical men took another step. Mercer lifted his hand again. No. Mr. Young appreciates rational conversations. He removed a folded document from his coat pocket. I brought something. He placed it gently on a nearby table. A settlement? Rebecca laughed in disbelief. A settlement? Mercer nodded. Federal investigations eventually end. Trials conclude. Companies reorganize. But people who survive become wealthy. Gary looked at the paper without approaching. What is it? Everything. Rebecca picked it up before Gary could stop her. Her eyes widened. This is impossible. Gary remained where he stood. What? She looked at him. It transfers every remaining Meridian holding. Manufacturing. Real estate. Patents. Investment funds. To you. Gary stared at Mercer. You expect me to believe that? No. I expect you to read page 12. Rebecca turned pages rapidly, then stopped. She looked stunned. Gary. What? He's resigning. He admits corporate responsibility. He accepts civil liability. He turns over ownership. Gary understood immediately. This isn't surrender. Mercer nodded approvingly. Excellent. So you see it. Rebecca looked between them. I don't. Gary explained quietly. If he signs everything over to me, every lawsuit reaches me first. Rebecca slowly understood. He wants you carrying legal responsibility. Mercer smiled. Exactly. Someone must inherit consequences. Gary placed both hands inside his jacket pockets. I won't sign. I know. Mercer seemed almost pleased. That's why I also prepared another option. He reached into his coat again. This time he removed a small envelope. Hannah wrote this. Gary's heartbeat remained steady. Mercer tossed the envelope across the floor. It slid until stopping near Gary's shoes. Read it. Gary picked it up. The handwriting belonged unmistakably to Hannah. Gary. If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Please don't believe anything Mercer tells you. I finally know what Daniel died trying to expose. I should have trusted you months ago. I'm sorry. Gary stopped reading. The remaining lines blurred slightly, not because of tears, because his mind had already begun analyzing. The paper, the ink, the folds, fresh, recently written. Hannah was alive. Mercer watched carefully. She asked me to deliver it. Gary folded the letter. When did she write this? This morning. So she's alive. Mercer smiled. For now. Rebecca exploded. You son of... Gary quietly raised one hand. She stopped immediately. Mercer noticed. Remarkable discipline. Gary looked directly into Mercer's eyes. You didn't come here for the flash drive? Mercer's smile disappeared for the first time. No. You came for me. Silence. Gary continued. If you wanted the evidence, your men would have rushed us the moment the lights went out. They're waiting. They're watching. They're following your orders. Mercer said nothing. Gary took one slow step forward. You need something only I can give you. Rebecca looked confused. Mercer looked interested. Gary continued. Hannah doesn't know where the remaining evidence is. Rebecca doesn't. Laura doesn't. But you believe I do? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mercer gave a slow clap. 3 quiet applauses echoed through the archive. I truly underestimated you. He nodded toward one of his men. The man produced a satellite phone. Mercer extended it toward Gary. Call her. Gary frowned. Hannah? If she answers? Mercer smiled. You'll tell me where the second archive is. Rebecca looked sharply toward Gary. Second archive. Gary never changed expression, because there was no second archive. At least, not one he knew about. Mercer had just revealed something unexpected. Daniel Whitaker had hidden more than one cache of evidence. Mercer believed Gary knew where, which meant Whitaker had left another trail. Mercer misunderstood why. Gary accepted the satellite phone. Not to negotiate, to learn. The line connected almost immediately. A woman's voice answered. Quiet. Shaking. Gary. His entire body froze for the first time since this nightmare had begun. Hannah, I'm so sorry. Her voice cracked. They killed Daniel. They're going to kill me. Gary closed his eyes briefly. No. I'm coming. A sharp male voice interrupted from Hannah's side. Time's up. The line went dead. Mercer slowly held out his hand. Now. He smiled once again. Tell me where Daniel Whitaker hid the rest. Gary looked down at the silent satellite phone, then slowly smiled for the first time that night. It was a small smile, calm, certain. Mercer's own expression faded, because Gary had just realized something Mercer had not. If Hannah had been allowed to speak freely for even those few seconds, then whoever was holding her had not been listening closely, and Hannah had intentionally repeated one word twice. Daniel. Not Daniel Whitaker. Just Daniel. Exactly the way she referred to one specific place they had once visited together. It was not a name, it was a location. And Hannah had just told him where she was. Nathan Mercer noticed the smile. It lasted less than a second, but it was enough. His expression hardened. What did she tell you? Gary looked at the silent satellite phone before handing it back. Nothing useful. Mercer studied his face. He had spent 40 years reading board members, politicians, and investors. He knew when people lied, yet Gary's calm refused to crack. Rebecca recognized it immediately. He had figured something out. She simply did not know what. Mercer extended his hand. The flash drive. Gary slowly shook his head. No. One of the tactical men stepped forward again. This time Mercer did not stop him. The man reached inside his jacket. Not for a pistol, for a compact taser. Mercer preferred prisoners alive. Gary had expected that. Dead men could not answer questions. The tactical man lunged. Gary pivoted before the weapon reached him. Years of inspecting heavy machinery had taught him one lesson above everything else. Never fight strength. Redirect momentum. He caught the attacker's wrist with both hands and twisted sharply. The taser discharged into empty air. Blue sparks flashed through the darkness. The attacker stumbled forward. Gary shoved him directly into the second guard. Both men crashed into steel shelving. Rows of engineering binders spilled across the concrete floor. Rebecca reacted instantly. She grabbed the nearest metal binder and swung it hard. The edge struck the second attacker's shoulder. He lost balance. Mercer stepped backward. Not frightened, calculating. He reached calmly inside his coat. This time it was a handgun. Small, matte black, suppressor attached. Everything stopped. Gary froze. Rebecca slowly lowered the steel binder. Mercer sighed. I had hoped to avoid this. He aimed directly at Gary. You continue disappointing me. Gary kept his voice steady. You won't shoot? Mercer's eyebrow lifted slightly. No. You still need answers. Mercer smiled faintly. I only need one answer. The rest becomes unnecessary. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Far away. Still several minutes out. Mercer heard them too. His eyes shifted toward broken skylights. Your detective is efficient, Gary answered. She's thorough. Mercer nodded once. I respect competence. He took one careful step closer. So let's end this. Where's the second archive? Gary remained silent. Mercer cocked the pistol. Rebecca spoke. There isn't one. Mercer ignored her. He looked only at Gary. Daniel trusted engineers. They think in redundancy. Every critical system has a backup. He hid another archive. Gary finally answered. I believe you're right. Mercer's eyes narrowed. But I don't know where. For the first time, uncertainty crossed Mercer's face. Tiny, barely visible. Enough. Gary saw it. Mercer was gambling. He did not know. He suspected. Nothing more. Gary spoke slowly. You've spent months chasing assumptions. You believed Hannah stole evidence. She didn't. You believed I knew everything. I don't. You've built your empire on incomplete information. Mercer's voice cooled. My empire still exists. Gary looked directly into his eyes. No. It ended the moment you walked into this building. Mercer almost laughed. You think those papers destroy me? Gary shook his head. No. You do? Silence. Gary continued. You came personally. You left your lawyers. You left your board. You left your public image. You entered a crime scene carrying an illegal firearm. Rebecca immediately understood. Laura, federal agents, body cameras, everything. Mercer realized it 1 second later. His expression changed completely. He looked toward the stairwell. Too late. Power suddenly returned. Every fluorescent light burst to life simultaneously. Bright white light flooded the archive. Tiny red dots appeared on concrete walls. Laser sights. Dozens. A commanding voice thundered through the building. Federal agents, drop your weapon. Hands where we can see them. Mercer's 2 remaining guards instinctively raised their weapons. Mercer shouted. No, too late. Flashbang grenades exploded from both stairwells. The fourth floor erupted into blinding white light. Rebecca covered her face. Gary closed his eyes just before the explosion. Training, not military, industrial. He knew never to stare at bright flashes. The tactical guards fired blindly. 3 shots, 4. Then disciplined return fire answered. Glass shattered. Metal rang. Voices echoed from every direction. Weapon down. Clear left. Moving Mercer disappeared behind overturned shelving. Gary grabbed Rebecca. Stay down. She nodded. The exchange lasted less than 15 seconds. Professional teams. No wasted movement. Then, silence. Laura's voice. Clear, another agent answered. Second suspect secured. Third suspect in custody. Gary slowly stood. Mercer remained kneeling beside collapsed shelving. His pistol lay several feet away. Federal agents surrounded him from every angle. Laura walked forward wearing an FBI tactical vest over her rain jacket. She looked directly at Gary. You all right? We're fine. She nodded once before facing Mercer. Nathan Mercer. You are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, fraud, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and multiple homicide investigations. Mercer listened quietly. No anger, no resistance. He simply looked toward Gary. This isn't over, Gary answered calmly. It already is. Mercer smiled again. You still haven't found Hannah? Laura stepped closer. We will. Mercer laughed softly. You won't. They move every 6 hours. Gary suddenly spoke. No. Mercer looked at him. They moved every 6 hours. Past tense? Mercer's smile faded. Gary continued. Hannah wasn't giving me directions. She was telling me where they forgot to move her. Rebecca stared. What? Gary looked toward Laura. Daniel wasn't a person. It was Daniel Bridge. Laura immediately understood. The old railroad bridge. Gary nodded. Hannah and I stopped there every anniversary. Nobody else knew. Laura turned sharply toward another agent. Get Allegheny County satellite maps. Now. The agent hurried away. Gary reached into his pocket. He removed the folded letter. He stared at Hannah's handwriting once more. Then something caught his attention. Tiny blue smudge. Printer ink. Not fountain pen. He examined the paper closely. A watermark appeared under the fluorescent lights. Riverside Conference Center. Rebecca frowned. That's a hotel? Gary shook his head. No. It closed 3 years ago. Laura looked up from her tablet. It didn't close. It became temporary storage after the flood. Gary suddenly remembered. Daniel Bridge stood less than half a mile from the abandoned conference center. 2 connected locations. Industrial district, easy access, few witnesses. Laura was already issuing orders. SWAT. Medical. Hostage rescue. Move. Within seconds, the building emptied. Only forensic teams remained. Mercer watched every officer leave. Then he quietly laughed again. Laura turned. What's funny? Mercer looked directly at Gary. You still don't understand. Gary waited. Hannah wasn't kidnapped. Rebecca frowned. What? Mercer smiled. She came willingly. Laura interrupted sharply. Save it for your attorney. But Mercer continued anyway. Ask her why. Ask her what she signed. Gary said nothing. He had learned one lesson repeatedly. Mercer weaponized doubt. Every sentence contained poison. Facts would answer, not speculation. Laura approached Gary. We've got helicopters heading to Daniel Bridge. You coming? Gary looked toward Mercer one final time. The older man no longer appeared powerful, only smaller. An aging executive sitting in handcuffs among scattered documents he had spent decades trying to bury. Gary slipped Daniel Whitaker's envelope inside his jacket. The truth isn't finished yet. Laura nodded. No. It isn't. They hurried downstairs toward waiting armored vehicles. Rain still fell heavily across Pittsburgh. Engines roared to life. Convoys pulled away from the archive. Behind them, federal evidence teams sealed every entrance. Mercer sat silently inside an armored transport, watching through rain-covered glass. Not frightened, not defeated, waiting. Because somewhere beneath the abandoned Daniel Bridge, Hannah was still alive. And whatever she had signed could either destroy the final pieces of Mercer's empire or become the last trap waiting for Gary. The convoy crossed the Monongahela River with sirens cutting through the rain. Red and blue lights reflected across wet steel beams as armored vehicles accelerated toward the abandoned industrial district east of downtown Pittsburgh. Nobody inside Laura Bennett's command vehicle spoke for nearly 5 minutes. Every officer reviewed satellite images, old engineering maps, emergency access tunnels, structural reports dating back more than 30 years. Daniel Bridge had once carried freight trains over the Allegheny River before a newer route replaced it. Beneath the bridge sat maintenance chambers, forgotten utility passages, and abandoned service buildings that most people no longer remembered existed. Gary studied every image without saying a word. Laura finally looked at him. "You've been here before?" "Every anniversary." Hannah loved the river. He looked through the rain-covered windshield. "We used to bring coffee before sunrise." Rebecca quietly asked, "Did Mercer know that?" Gary shook his head. "No. Only Hannah." Laura zoomed into another map. "The conference center sits here." She pointed to a rectangular building less than half a mile away. "The bridge maintenance tunnel connects underneath." Gary immediately understood. If someone needed to move people unseen, they'd use the tunnel. Laura nodded. "Exactly." The convoy divided into 2 assault teams. One surrounded the abandoned conference center. The second approached Daniel Bridge from below. Drones lifted into the night. Thermal cameras scanned rooftops. Within seconds, an operator spoke. 3 heat signatures. Lower maintenance chamber. Possible 4th. Laura grabbed her radio. "Hold perimeter. No entry until confirmation." Gary watched the monitor. One figure remained motionless. 2 motionless. Laura noticed it too. That could be a hostage. She turned toward Gary. "You stay behind us." He answered calmly. "I've already ignored that advice once." Laura almost smiled. "And it nearly got you killed." She wasn't wrong. The rescue team entered through an old maintenance hatch. Concrete stairs descended beneath the bridge. Water dripped steadily from rusted pipes overhead. Generators hummed somewhere below. The tunnel smelled of damp steel and diesel fuel. Every step echoed. Agents advanced methodically, one section at a time. Flashlights swept across abandoned equipment. Nothing. Another corridor. Nothing. Then, a woman's voice, weak. "Help!" Gary froze. "Hannah." Laura raised one fist. Everyone stopped. The rescue team split into 2 columns. The voice came again. "Gary?" This time closer. They rounded one final corner. A heavy steel security door stood partially open. Inside, Hannah sat tied to a metal chair. Her wrists were bound. Her face showed bruises. One side of her forehead carried dried blood. Yet she remained conscious. The moment she saw Gary, tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry." Gary rushed forward. An FBI medic immediately checked the room for explosives. "Clear." Another agent cut the restraints. Gary knelt beside Hannah. She collapsed into his arms. Neither spoke for several seconds. Nothing needed saying. Hannah trembled uncontrollably. "I'm sorry." She whispered it again. "I should have believed you." Gary gently held her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She nodded weakly. "They never wanted to kill me. They wanted signatures." Laura stepped closer. "What signatures?" Hannah looked toward the agents. "Company transfer documents. False statements. They wanted me to say Gary controlled everything." Rebecca exchanged a glance with Laura. Exactly what Mercer had planned. Transfer liability. Destroy the only honest witness. Hannah reached inside her torn jacket. The medic hesitated. Gary nodded carefully. She removed a folded plastic evidence pouch hidden beneath the inner lining. I couldn't let them find this. Laura accepted it carefully. Inside sat a small black memory card. Not a flash drive, a micro SD card. Hannah looked at Gary. Daniel gave it to me. He knew someone was following him. He told me. She struggled to breathe. If anything happened, only trust Gary. Gary closed his eyes briefly. Daniel Whitaker had understood everything long before his own death. Laura handed the evidence pouch directly to a forensic technician. Chain of custody. The technician sealed it immediately. Logged. Time 23:14. Nothing could disappear now. Everything belonged to the federal investigation. An agent entered the room moments later. Conference center secured. No additional suspects. Laura nodded. Good. Then her radio crackled. Command, we have an update. She answered. Go. Nathan Mercer has requested an immediate meeting with federal prosecutors. Laura frowned. Already? Yes. He wants immunity. Rebecca laughed quietly. He finally realized. Gary looked toward the tunnel entrance. No, he realized before tonight. He simply ran out of options. 3 weeks later, federal courthouses rarely attracted crowds before sunrise. That morning was different. Satellite news trucks lined Grant Street. National reporters waited outside the United States District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Meridian Infrastructure Holdings had officially entered federal receivership. More than 70 shell companies faced investigation. Dozens of executives accepted plea agreements. Several state officials resigned. Banks froze hundreds of millions of dollars in suspicious accounts. The story dominated national headlines. Gary never gave a television interview. He attended court only when subpoenaed. Nothing more. Inside courtroom 3, Nathan Mercer stood wearing a plain Navy prison uniform. No tailored suit, no polished shoes, no boardroom confidence. Just another defendant waiting for sentencing. Judge Eleanor Brooks reviewed the final agreement. The defendant has provided substantial cooperation. She paused. But this court also recognizes decades of calculated fraud, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and criminal enterprise. The courtroom remained silent. Nathan Mercer looked once toward Gary. Gary returned the look without emotion. No triumph, no hatred, only distance. The judge continued. The sentence of this court, is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Mercer closed his eyes. For the first time, he appeared old. Very old. The marshals escorted him away. He never looked back again. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward Gary. Mr. Young, do you forgive your wife? What happens next? Will you take control of Meridian's remaining assets? Gary stopped only once, long enough to answer a single question. I don't want someone else's empire. Then, he walked away. 6 months later, Harris Engineering Services occupied the same modest office building where Gary had worked before everything changed. The same coffee machine still stood in the break room. The same pickup trucks filled the parking lot. The same employees greeted one another every morning. Only one difference existed. Gary now owned the company. After federal liquidation, employees had been given the opportunity to purchase shares. Gary bought controlling interest quietly. No celebration, no press conference. He simply protected the people who had stood beside him from the beginning. Rebecca Lawson opened her own legal practice, specializing in corporate whistleblower protection. Laura Bennett received a commendation from the Department of Justice. Daniel Whitaker's family established a scholarship for engineering students committed to ethical leadership. His name finally became associated with courage instead of tragedy. As for Hannah, healing came slowly. Not because of physical injuries, because trust rebuilds more slowly than broken bones. Some mornings she still woke from nightmares. Some evenings silence filled the house. Gary never demanded explanations before she was ready. He simply remained present. One evening in early autumn, they returned to Daniel Bridge. The river moved quietly beneath fading orange sunlight. No police, no sirens, no fear, just water. Hannah stood beside the railing. "I almost destroyed everything." Gary looked toward the horizon. "You didn't. I betrayed you. You believed the wrong people. I should have trusted you." He nodded gently. "Yes." She wiped away tears. "I don't expect forgiveness." Gary remained silent for a long moment. Then he answered with complete honesty. "Forgiveness isn't a single decision. It's something people build. One day at a time." Hannah slowly reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. Neither of them spoke again. They simply watched the river continue forward. Just as life always does. Some people mistake quiet men for weak men. They assume humility means failure. They believe expensive suits reveal success, while worn jackets hide insignificance. But appearances have never carried truth. Character does. Patience does. Evidence does. Gary Young never defeated Nathan Mercer through anger. He never won because he shouted louder. He won because he refused to move before facts were ready. He trusted evidence over emotion, the law over revenge, truth over appearances. And in the end, that proved stronger than every lie money could buy. Every story leaves behind more than an ending. It leaves behind a choice. Gary Young's journey reminds us that the strongest people are not always the loudest, the richest, or the most admired. More often, they are the ones who stay calm when everything around them falls apart. They understand that anger can win an argument, but only truth can win justice. Trust should never be given blindly, yet neither should it be destroyed by appearances alone. Real strength is measured by character, when no one is watching, by patience, when revenge feels easier, and by the courage to let facts speak louder than emotions. Perhaps you've experienced a moment when someone underestimated you, doubted your integrity, or judged your worth based only on what they could see. If so, remember, this time has a remarkable way of revealing what pride tries to hide. You don't have to prove yourself to everyone. Keep building, keep preparing, and keep walking with integrity. The people who truly matter will eventually recognize your value, and the truth has a way of finding the light, even after years in the darkness. Now I'd love to hear from you. If you were in Gary's position, would you have forgiven Hannah, or would you have walked away forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective may encourage someone else who is facing a similar situation today. And if stories like this remind you that quiet strength, resilience, and truth still matter, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow's story explores another unforgettable moment when an ordinary person refuses to be defined by appearances, and the ending may surprise you even more.